Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Myra giggled at the familiar sight. Hee hee. Yep, just like always. The word again was key. Rhodes didn't need any further explanation. This scene told him everything he needed to know about Fairy Tale. Here. Myra said, placing a small dessert plate in front of him. A perfectly untouched strawberry pudding. Bring this to Riza at the right moment. Rhodes blinked in confusion. What do you mean by the right moment? Myra simply pointed toward Riza and smiled without saying a word. Just seconds ago, the Titania of Fairy Tale, the woman who had struck fear into everyone moments earlier, suddenly seemed to wither. She swayed on her feet before staggering back toward her seat, looking as though she had lost all will to live. She didn't even sit. Instead, she dropped to her knees, gently picking up shattered porcelain shards and ruined dessert from the floor. My strawberry pudding, she murmured, voice trembling. In an instant, the once dominant fairy queen looked more like a heartbroken little girl. Oh, Riza's so adorable when she's like this. Myra mused, resting her cheek in her palm as she enjoyed the unusual sight. Is now the right time? Rhodes hesitated before cautiously stepping toward Riza. You imbeciles. The air around Riza turned heavy, the pressure suffocating. She slowly turned to glare at the culprits still sprawled out on the ground. A collective shiver ran through them. Miss Riza? Rhodes called out, deliberately adding a respectful title. Riza's head snapped toward him, her face partially shadowed. One of her eyes seemed to gleam an ominous red, like a beast ready to pounce. The sheer intensity of her aura made Rhodes' heart skip a beat. It felt as if her mere gaze had dragged him into a swirling vortex of pressure. Why, your pudding? It's strawberry flavored too. Rhodes managed to squeeze out, his voice slightly strained. For a brief moment, the terrifying aura lingered. Then, just as suddenly, the Titania of Fairy Tale transformed. Riza straightened up, brushed a hand through her crimson hair, and smiled. Warmly, almost gently. Thank you very much, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Then, as if reflecting on her actions, she clenched her fist and sighed. Honestly, I nearly lost my temper over something as trivial as pudding. I still have much to learn. Happy flapped his wings and casually floated beside Rhodes' ear. Without hesitation, the little blue exceed muttered. You did lose your temper. Rhodes turned to the feline, his expression one of pure admiration. Brave little cat, do you have no regard for your own life? Riza, however, ignored the remark and turned her attention back to Rhodes. Speaking of which, you're Rhodes, right? Her expression softened. I'm truly touched that you're already looking out for your guildmates after just joining Fairy Tale. A genuinely moved expression spread across her face. Before Rhodes could react, Riza pulled him into a tight hug, pressing his head into her chest plate. This is what Fairy Tale should be like, she declared. Bang. Rhodes' forehead collided with the cold, hard surface of her armor. A sharp, metallic clang echoed through the tavern. His vision blurred, and his head throbbed from the impact. Dazed, he barely managed to glance toward Myra at the bar, who was watching with an amused smile and giving him a thumbs up. Was this all part of your plan, Miss Myra? Chapter 22, Miss Togan. Rhodes returned to the counter alive. Myra greeted him with a playful smile. So, how was it? Riza's hug? Rhodes rubbed his forehead, still feeling the dull ache. Solid as a rock. I can't tell whether you misspoke or just stated the obvious. Myra giggled, covering her mouth as amusement sparkled in her eyes. Why does she always wear armor? Rhodes muttered, rubbing the sore spot. If Riza hadn't been wearing armor just now, it might have been embarrassing, but at least he wouldn't have a splitting headache. Riza has been like that since she was a child. Other than when she bathes or sleeps, she rarely takes it off. Myra said as she leisurely wiped the counter. Then, as if lost in thought, she added softly. Maybe it's because she feels uneasy. Someone that strong can feel uneasy? Rhodes found it hard to believe. He always thought he was the most anxious one in the guild. Until he learned proper magic, he didn't even have the confidence to leave Magnolia. This kind of thing isn't about strength. It's about the heart. Myra said quietly, wrapping her right hand around her left arm. For the first time, her usual brightness dimmed, replaced by a look of quiet sorrow. Many of our fairy tale comrades carry heavy burdens. Pain, trauma, hardships. She continued. Even me. No, even you, Rhodes. Myra lifted her gaze, meeting his directly. I'll never forget the confusion and fear in your eyes when we first met. Rhodes looked into her gentle blue eyes. For once, there was no teasing, no mischief, no amusement at his expense. Instead, there was understanding. A sadness that mirrored his own. Had Myra also been through something painful? Something heavier than she let on? I don't want to leave that impression, Rhodes said after a moment. Even if I'm not that strong yet. Then he changed the subject. Is the guild master not here today? Myra seemed to shake off her own thoughts and smiled again. He's upstairs on the second floor, writing an apology letter. Oh. Rhodes responded absent-mindedly, until his brain caught up. Wait. The master is writing an apology letter? To who? The Magic Council. Myra said nonchalantly. Her amusement was back, the twinkle in her eye unmistakable. Apparently, Gray got reported for sexual harassment. Gray? Rhodes instinctively wanted to defend him. Gray's not that kind of guy. But then, he thought about it again. That guy does have a serious stripping problem. So he actually did it? Of course, nothing inappropriate actually happened. Myra said with a playful smile. He just, well, accidentally stripped completely naked while escorting a government official's carriage. Rhodes glanced over at Gray, who was now lounging at a table, casually chatting with people. Wearing only his shorts. Yeah, that tracks. The client's wife and daughter were in that carriage. Myra added, clearly enjoying the story. If Gray hadn't taken down a group of bandits along the way and protected them flawlessly, this wouldn't have just ended in a simple complaint. Then why is the master writing the apology for him? Rhodes couldn't help but feel bad for Makarov. The old man took care of everyone in the guild, yet he always had to clean up their messes. Because Gray is a member of Fairy Tale. Any action he takes during a job reflects on the guild as a whole. Myra explained. The guild handles the aftermath, makes amends when necessary, and, of course, it's up to the master to decide how to discipline Gray afterward. She glanced up at the second floor with a fond look. The master is like a father to all of us, especially to the ones who grew up without a home. A responsible head of the family. Rhodes murmured, admiration in his eyes. You too, Rhodes. Hey? Before Myra could finish her thought, Rhodes suddenly felt his vision blur. A wave of drowsiness crashed over him, and before he could react, he collapsed. Myra barely had time to catch him before her own knees buckled, and she slumped onto the counter. That's weird. Why am I suddenly so sleepy? All around them, the tavern grew eerily silent. One by one, guild members who had been drinking, laughing, and brawling just moments ago fell unconscious. Some slumping onto tables, others crashing onto the floor. Warm, who had been playing with Happy, rolled onto his back on the table, his heart-shaped belly exposed as he dozed off. This feeling. Is it mistaken? Mirza resisted for a few more seconds before her body gave out, and she slumped onto the table, fast asleep. Even Makarov, sitting on the second floor, wavered unsteadily. His tiny frame swayed as drowsiness overtook him. The old guild master leapt down from the railing, landing gracefully on the first floor despite his age. He narrowed his eyes, watching as a figure strode in. You. How long are you going to keep pulling this stunt? The intruder wore a black turban, a long flowing cloak, and a scarf covering the lower half of his face. His confident steps barely made a sound as he entered the guild hall. Sorry, I'll apologize to everyone when I get the chance, Mustogan said calmly. Without another word, he walked to the mission board, grabbed a request, handed it to the master for approval, and immediately turned to leave. Honestly, hurry up and dispel the magic. Makarov sighed. Understood. The moment Mustogan stepped out of the guild's front door, his figure vanished. Erased from existence like a sketch wiped clean. At the same time, the unconscious guild members stirred awake all at once. Damn it. Was that Mustogan again? That guy. His sleep magic is always way too overpowered. Groans and complaints echoed through the tavern as everyone shook off their sudden slumber. Natsu, on the other hand, wasted no time charging straight for the exit. Mustogan. Come fight me. You coward, you always pull this trick and run. Rhodes, meanwhile, slowly opened his eyes and found himself sprawled on the floor. He blinked in confusion, his chest still feeling oddly heavy. Ah, sorry, I'll get up now. Myra, who had apparently collapsed on top of him, sat up gracefully and offered Rhodes a hand. I was trying to help you, but I didn't expect it to be Mustogan's sleep magic. she said apologetically. Rhodes took her hand and pulled himself up, but his expression remained blank, his mind still processing what had happened. It's okay, Rhodes. Myra reassured him gently. This is Fairy Tale. Miss Togan is our comrade. He meant no harm. Her tone was light and soothing, but as she held Rhodes' hand, she noticed the cool dampness of his palm. His fingers trembled slightly before clenching into a tight fist. Myra's eyes softened. He is anxious. She held his hand between both of hers, trying to reassure him. Rhodes pressed his lips together, then gently withdrew his hand and balled it into a fist. I know. I'm fine, he said quietly. Something was definitely wrong. Being caught off guard and suddenly losing consciousness without any power to resist. It was a terrifying experience for Rhodes. The sense of security he had slowly built over the past few days, enjoying the guild's lively and cheerful atmosphere, was now shaken. There are still many things in this world that I don't understand. And they're probably even more terrifying than I realize. Miss Togan was an ally, but if someone as powerful as him existed within Fairy Tale, then there had to be enemies of equal strength out there too, right? Rhodes took a few deep breaths, forcing himself to steady his racing heartbeat. Sensing his unease, Worm hurried back and clung to his leg. A familiar warmth radiated from the little Poro's heart-shaped belly. Rhodes sighed and picked him up, feeling the soft fluff in his arms. Oddly enough, the little creature gave him a small sense of security. Fear comes from the unknown and from weakness, Rhodes thought. He lifted Worm to eye level and looked into its round, blinking eyes. If he was afraid, then the solution was simple. He just had to become stronger. Chapter 23, Weekly Sorcerer. Thank you. Rhodes nodded at Myra, appreciating her kindness. Now I understand why Loki said no one has ever seen Miss Togan's real face. Myra still seemed a little concerned but followed along with his words. Well, he's always been mysterious. He probably has his own reasons. Rhodes scanned the guild and noticed the chaos left behind by Miss Togan's magic. Even Rizza was knocked out? Does that mean Miss Togan is stronger than her? Myra shook her head. Strength isn't something you can compare that easily, she explained. If they fought head-on, Rizza would have ways to counter his sleep magic. You can't determine who's stronger unless they truly go all out against each other. I see. Rhodes nodded thoughtfully. Myra claims she's not much of a fighter, but she always seems to have a solid understanding of battles. Is it because she knows her guildmates well? Or has she just watched too many fights? Around them, the guild members were reacting in their own ways. Some simply shrugged and went about their business, unfazed by Miss Togan's actions. Others were proud that such a powerful wizard was part of Fairy Tale, openly expressing their admiration. A few, however, were clearly annoyed and shouted about getting revenge on him one day. This was how Fairy Tale functioned. Everyone had their own personalities, and they accepted each other. Flaws and all. And if they couldn't tolerate something, they fought. And if the fight didn't settle things, they fought again. At the end of the day, they were still family. Alright, I hate Miss Togan now. In the future, I'm going to beat him up with multiple hands and feet. Rhodes said. It was the kind of statement that perfectly matched Fairy Tale style. Bold, passionate, and direct. The only problem? Actually pulling it off. Myra chuckled. Well, you've got a long way to go. She paused for a moment, then gave him a playful smile. Also, I think you just used the phrase 7 hands and 8 feet incorrectly. Did I? Rhodes grinned. My magic is meant for brawls. When I fight him, there'll definitely be way more than 7 hands and 8 feet involved. Myra sighed, shaking her head in amusement. Alright. Mikarov's voice cut through the chatter. Miss Togan has his reasons for doing this. I'll explain it to you later. But first. He cast a quick glance in Rhodes' direction. Seeing Myra talking to him so naturally, the guild master let out a small sigh of relief. Then his eyes narrowed, and he turned his full attention to another troublemaker. Gray. Yes. Gray instinctively stood at attention as soon as his name was called. You really outdid yourself this time. Thanks to you, I got another earful from the Magic Council. Sorry. Gray averted his gaze, clearly guilty, unable to meet the guildmaster's eyes. At that moment, Natsu stormed back into the guild, grumbling in frustration after failing to catch up to Miss Togan. But the second he spotted Gray's distressed expression, his irritation vanished, replaced by a wide, smug grin. Bursts of laughter erupted from his throat. Laughter so fiery it looked like he was about to breathe actual flames. Ahahaha. Gray, you got chewed out again. TCH. Gray clenched his teeth. Damn you, Natsu. As much as he disliked being scolded by Makarov, being mocked by Natsu was far worse. You too, Natsu. Mikarov's booming voice cut through the noise, his anger shifting targets. Natsu blinked. Huh? Me? Would you care to explain why a simple mission to capture a wild boar ended with several acres of farmland being burned down? You even dried up the water in the rice fields. Natsu and Gray now stood side by side, cold sweat dripping down their faces. You moron. You did more damage than the wild boar itself. For the next several minutes, Makarov unleashed his full wrath upon them. His magic kicked in, causing his head to enlarge until it practically filled the room. His gaping mouth, big enough to swallow them whole, bellowed so loudly that Natsu and Gray nearly got blasted off their feet. Yet, despite all the yelling, Makarov never actually told them to change their ways. Nor did he hand out any real punishment. Once he'd vented enough frustration, the guild master simply huffed and went back to writing his self-criticism for the council. Meanwhile, Natsu coughed up the money for the farmland damages right then and there, so that problem was settled on the spot. Gray, for his part, sincerely apologized to the client. Though the phrase "I promise it won't happen again" was, predictably, a lie. But at the very least, the guild made a mental note: next time there's an escort mission involving noblewoman, do not assign Gray. Makarov caught sight of a familiar face lounging on the stairs, casually entertaining two women at once. Look. He was definitely off the escort mission roster as well. Last time, he flirted with the lead actress of the performing arts company that issued the request, resulting in yet another formal complaint. Makarov sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. One after another. These kids are going to be the death of me. But as he gazed across the guild, watching the lively chaos, the endless noise, the boundless energy, he couldn't help but smile. Yes, they were troublesome. But they were happy troubles. Just then, Myra arrived at the counter, carrying a tray with tea and snacks, perfectly timed as always. Makarov's mood improved instantly. If you're going this far, might as well swap the tea for some wine, he suggested, grinning. Myra planted both hands on her hips and shot him a stern look. Absolutely not, master. You drank enough yesterday. You need to cut back. Makarov wilted. Yes, ma'am. For all his wisdom and power, he was often the one giving the guild headaches. During the afternoon break, Rode flipped through the pages of a magazine as Lockie retrieved something from behind the counter. Of course, there are magazines, Lockie said, handing him a book. This is Sorcerer Weekly, the most popular wizarding magazine right now. I bought this copy a few weeks ago and totally forgot to bring it home. Rhodes examined the cover. It featured three strikingly handsome men posing dramatically. One of them, Rhodes recognized immediately. Hibiki, the wizard who had helped him install the language package. The other two had their own unique charms, but something about the way the trio posed together made Rhodes think of Team Rocket? They're all from Blue Pegasus, right? Rhodes asked, raising an eyebrow. Lockie nodded. Yep, this issue's theme is Blue Pegasus. A guild known for its abundance of handsome men. Rhodes had reason to suspect that the only reason Lockie had left it at the guild was because she had been too distracted admiring the photos and had forgotten to take it home. Flipping open the magazine, he found the first page dedicated to Hibiki, complete with details about his age, magic, hobbies, and even his relationship status. The next two profiles followed the same format, introducing his teammates from the same guild. Together, Hibiki 100 Night Slates, Eve Holy Night Charm, and Ren Sky Night Akatsuki formed the famous Tremens of Blue Pegasus. A few pages later, the interview section mentioned that they were guided by an incredibly powerful wizard, someone they deeply respected as both a leader and mentor. All three of them expressed admiration for this man, describing him as a true gentleman and a paragon of masculinity. That man was none other than Ikaya Vandlay Kotabuki, the strongest wizard in Blue Pegasus. However, the article noted that when Ikaya learned the magazine had limited space, he graciously chose to let his younger teammates take the spotlight instead, a truly selfless act that moved many to tears. Rhodes paused and murmured, "Seems like a good guy." Turning the page, he was immediately greeted by an advertisement. The featured product for this issue. Magic Mosquito Repellent Elixir. A single spray keeps the bugs away. According to the description, this potion far outperformed traditional mosquito coils or floral-scented insect repellents. The merchant had clearly invested heavily in this advertisement. So much so that when Rhodes lingered on the page for long enough, the magazine activated a built-in magical projection. A shimmering 3D hologram appeared in midair, displaying a model gracefully spraying the potion and demonstrating its effects in real time. The professional narration and polished advertising slogans were so convincing that even Rhodes, who wasn't exactly swimming in cash, felt tempted to buy a bottle. Chapter 24, A Surprise in the Magazine. Another one of these ads. So annoying. Lockie's attitude toward the advertisement was much like how Rhodes felt about software pop-ups. Interesting at first, but tiresome after seeing them too often. She leaned in slightly and spoke in a mysterious tone. Flip a few more pages, There's a surprise, a surprise? Rhodes raised an eyebrow but turned the pages as she suggested. The section that followed the advertisement was precisely what he had been looking for. The news column. Though Lockie was clearly referring to something else as the surprise. Rhodes still took a quick glance at the articles. Popular actress from Ryder Entertainment has a secret boyfriend? The headline claimed it was an expose, but the photo accompanying it only showed a couple from behind. Rhodes didn't recognize the actress, but her rumored boyfriend looked oddly familiar. Perhaps someone from the guild? The Magic Council to intensify crackdowns on dark guilds. This was a standard official report, though Rhodes had already confirmed indirectly that Fairy Tale was, in fact, not a dark guild. One particular title caught his attention: Fairy Tale Wizards Annihilate Infamous Bandit Gang in a Single Strike. It sounded like a normal article about guild activities. Until Rhodes skimmed through the details. The bandits were ruthless, and the battle was so intense that an entire pine forest on the mountainside was burned to ashes. Rhodes looked up at Lockie, unimpressed. Let me guess. A few weeks ago? Lockie smirked but said nothing. Rhodes sighed and shook his head. He didn't need to guess who the culprit was. He had already met that flame-loving pyromaniac. As Rhodes continued flipping through the magazine, he finally came across the surprise Lockie had mentioned. This. Isn't this? It was unmistakable. That iconic white hair, styled just as it was now, with bangs gathered into a neat tuft atop her head. It was Myra. But unlike the usual warm, cheerful expression he was used to, the smile in the photo was different. Sultry, confident, and undeniably captivating. What caught his attention even more was what she was wearing. Myra stood elegantly on a beach, dressed in a sea blue swimsuit. Her posture was effortless, one hand gently lifting her hair, as if caught in a casual yet breathtaking moment. The upper part of her swimsuit had so little fabric that Rhodes couldn't tell if it was even meant to be swimwear or lingerie. Even when he deliberately tried to look away from the more gravitationally strong areas, his gaze was drawn to the smooth curve of her shoulders and the delicate shape of her collarbone. Her lower attire was a long, high-slit skirt. Or rather, a large piece of fabric, casually knotted at her waist. It elegantly draped across her frame, accentuating her slim, enviable waistline. Her right leg was concealed beneath the flowing fabric, while her left leg was fully exposed through the slit, revealing long, flawless skin beneath the sunlight. For the first time, Rhodes noticed something else. Myra's Fairy Tale emblem was white and printed on the side of her left thigh. Lockie smirked as she leaned in. Well? Stunning, isn't she? You're speechless, huh? At first, Rhodes nodded instinctively, then quickly shook his head, realizing something felt off. But even after denying it, he still felt conflicted. Saying that Myra wasn't beautiful would just be lying to himself. Really? Lockie pouted in disappointment. I have almost every issue of Sorcerer Weekly from the past year, and at least 20 of them feature photos of Myra. Are you sure you don't want to take a look? And no. Rhodes' pride pushed him to refuse, but deep down, he had a nagging feeling that he would regret it. His expression twisted into an obvious inner struggle. I just wanted to borrow the magazine to learn more about the world here. But now that you're putting it like that, it feels weird no matter what I say. PFFT. Ha ha ha. Lockie burst into laughter, nearly doubling over. One hand clutched her waist while the other slapped the counter. Kana was right. Your reactions are hilarious, Rhodes. He was different. Unlike Natsu, who was completely oblivious, and unlike Mikao and Wakaba, who were shameless old pervs, only people like Rhodes, who knew exactly what was going on but were too shy to admit it, were the most fun to tease. Kana. Rhodes thought about the so-called bad woman who was always drinking. Myra had told him that she was a good person, but maybe he should take some notes in his little black book. Lockie finally stopped laughing when she saw Rhodes preparing to flee. Myra was invited to be Sorcerer Weekly's special model last year. She explained, smiling. She became incredibly popular after her first shoot. She then pointed at the boy band on the cover. Myra has actually appeared on more magazine covers than them. Rhodes blinked in surprise. She's probably the most popular cover model among all wizards in Fiore now. Lockie continued proudly. She's basically our guild's poster girl. So, she's the face of Fairy Tale. Rhodes finally understood Myra's role in the guild. Myra really is amazing. Fairy Tale was full of hidden talents. The S-class wizards were absolute powerhouses in battle. And those who didn't fight, like Myra, were just as legendary in other ways. It seemed that Fairy Tale's rise to fame wasn't just due to its legendary ability to stir up trouble. Although he had been tricked. Just a little. Rhodes still managed to borrow the magazine. A single issue of Sorcerer Weekly cost 300 jewels, which was roughly the price of 2 mugs of the cheapest beer. Since the magazine was published weekly, Rhodes figured he could afford it. However, Tracking down older issues was a different story. Instead of buying them, it was far easier to borrow from someone else and just buy the future issues himself. Luckily, Lockie had already promised to bring her collection over tomorrow. "It's not like I need them anymore," she had said. "Besides, it frees up space for my real collection." Rhodes had a feeling she meant her stash of torture devices. She also seemed to hold a grudge against Sorcerer Weekly. Apparently, the magazine claimed to feature the latest high-quality magic products, but not once had they ever showcased her favorite torture tools. "Seriously, it's false advertising," she grumbled. For the sake of keeping the borrowed magazines, Rhodes decided to play along. "Yeah. Definitely false advertising." With his full support, Lockie clenched her fist in determination. "I'll make sure to write a strongly worded complaint in this week's feedback section." Rhodes blinked, realizing he might have said the wrong thing. Maybe you should be a bit more decisive?" Lockie nodded firmly, eyes gleaming. "You're right. I need to be even more direct. Let them really understand how I feel." "Rhodes, did I just make it worse?" "Well, it all started when I was invited once by chance." Meyer's voice brought him back to reality. "And after that, it just became harder and harder to refuse." Meyer herself had never been particularly interested in modeling, but she hadn't minded doing it either. After all, she and Elfman had lost their sister just last year. For a long time, both of them had been drowning in grief, making it nearly impossible to take on wizard jobs. If not for the steady income from her photo shoots and a bit of savings they had set aside, the siblings might have ended up just as broke as Rhodes. Or even in debt. That was precisely why, even though she no longer needed the money, Meyer had never turned down the magazine's invitations. "Let's not dwell on that. How's your training going, Rhodes?" "Not bad. I think I'll be ready to try summoning a new creature in a few days." "A new creature?" Rhodes nodded. "Yeah, it's just a general term I use for my summons." "Was a Poro technically a wild monster?" "Maybe. Close enough." "Then, do you want to test yourself in an actual battle?" "Actual combat? With who?" Myra tapped her chin, pretending to think. "Well, you know how many battle junkies we have in this guild. Just pick one at random. If it's your first time, you should probably pick someone you dislike the most." Rhodes immediately suspected she was up to something. With Meyer's mischievous side, she was definitely stirring up trouble. But it wasn't a bad idea. Training alone could only get him so far. He glanced around the tavern and pointed without hesitation at a certain ladies' man. "Of course, the one I dislike the most is him." "Loke." "Huh?" Not far away, Loke, who had just been fed a sip of wine by a beautiful woman, suddenly lifted his head in confusion. Chapter 25, Combat Training. The battle was set in the guild's backyard. Loke actually wanted to take it to the main street out front, but Rhodes immediately refused. He had only been learning magic for a few days, and the odds of winning were not in his favor. If he got beaten up in public, he'd never live it down. Unfortunately, moving to the backyard didn't help much. Someone in the tavern shouted loudly. "Newcomer Rhodes' first battle. Challenging Loke." And just like that, almost everyone from the tavern came out to watch. "Loke, you lucky bastard. I want to fight the newbie too." Notsa pushed through the crowd, grinning eagerly, a small flame flickering between his teeth. Loke pushed up his glasses confidently, his signature smirk never fading. "There's nothing I can do about it. My light just shines too brightly." The moment he spoke. "Ah! Loke!" Two excited female fans screamed, clutching each other as if swooning from sheer admiration. Rhodes stared at the scene. This guy even had a personal fan club at a friendly match? This wasn't just annoying. He was ruining the guild's atmosphere. The two stood opposite each other, about 4 meters apart. Rhodes looked at Loke seriously and had to admit. This guy was annoyingly handsome. The guild members lined up in front of the door, watching with full excitement, completely unworried about any collateral damage. "All right, both sides are ready." Makarov stepped forward, his tiny figure radiating authority. Then, with a grin. "Bet on Loke to win, odds are 1-1. Bet on Rhodes to win. Odds are 10-1. Rhodes nearly stumbled over his own feet. "Master? What are you doing? Wasn't Makarov here to act as a referee? To make sure no one got hurt? Why was he running bets?" "Ah, well, since Kana isn't here, I figured I'd run the bets instead." "Don't worry." Makarov waved him off, completely unbothered. Rhodes rubbed his temples. So this was why the guild was so chaotic. Master himself encouraged it. "All right. Bets are in. Let the fight begin." Rhodes glanced at the 2 betting trays in front of Makarov. Loke's plate was overflowing with cash. His? 3 bills. He blinked. Then, he spotted a familiar one. "Go, Rhodes." Myra smiled sweetly, having placed one of the bets herself. A small but sincere show of support. Come on, rookie. Teach Loke a lesson. Mikau and Wakaba were grinning in amusement. It wasn't just about seeing Loke get beaten up, the high betting odds made it even more exciting. Rhodes suddenly raised his hand. Wait a minute. Master, 30,000 jewels. I'm betting on myself to lose. The crowd stared at him in disbelief. Makarov immediately shut it down with a wave of his hand. No match fixing allowed. Rhodes felt his chance to make a fortune slip away. Makarov ignored him completely, clapped his hands together, and grinned. All right. The battle begins now. Rhodes sighed, resigned to his fate. He grabbed his necklace, preparing to chant his summoning spell. Across from him, Loke smirked and held out the ring on his finger. Possession-type magic? I happen to be one too. Rhodes raised an eyebrow. Possession magic or not, you've seen me practice in the guild these past few days. You should know what my magic looks like. Loke shrugged, his usual confidence never fading. Sorry, I don't have a habit of paying attention to men. Rhodes twitched slightly. This guy really deserves a beating. He exhaled and began his chant. I am the one who bridges two worlds, you. Wait a minute. Loke flinched, eyes widening in shock. You're a celestial mage? Rhodes paused, confused. No, not really. But Master said my magic is kind of similar. He casually held up his necklace. See? I don't even use celestial keys. Loke was still frozen, staring at him like he'd seen a ghost. Right. Ha. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. His laugh was forced. Sweat started forming on his forehead. He hadn't even noticed that Rhodes wasn't using a key at all, his panic had completely taken over his common sense. Rhodes tilted his head. So? Are we continuing? Loke gulped. Then, in the most dramatic and suspicious way possible, he backed toward the exit, step by step. Actually. You know what? I'm feeling a little under the weather. His steps quickened. Yeah. It's not fair to fight like this. Let's have a rematch another day. Gotta go. Rhodes stood there, completely stunned. Huh? Hey. Everyone who had bet on Loke to win was completely dumbfounded. What is Loke doing? Those who lost money started complaining one after another. Loke. His two devoted fangirls immediately chased after him. Myra, on the other hand, placed a hand on her cheek, looking quite pleased. What a rare opportunity to participate, and I won money right away. She mused happily. Makarov also raked in quite a bit from the bets, but instead of celebrating, he looked deep in thought. Was Loke really that sensitive just because Rhodes' magic was somewhat similar to celestial spirit magic? Meanwhile, Mikau and Wakaba were overjoyed, throwing their arms around each other's shoulders. With 10-to-1 odds, they had won enough to indulge in several days' worth of drinks. Good job, rookie. You took down Loke in an instant. Happy, floating nearby, waved his little paws and complained. But he didn't fight at all. Ha. Natsu suddenly burst forward, grinning wildly. Alright then. I'll fight instead of Loke. Before Rhodes could even react, a hand landed firmly on Natsu's shoulder. No, Natsu. It was Ursa. Her expression was calm, but her grip on Natsu was anything but gentle. Rhodes has only been practicing magic for a few days. This match was supposed to test his abilities. You're too reckless, she stated. So instead, let me fight him. Rhodes blinked. Wait, what? How did this suddenly escalate? Miss Ursa, are you serious? He hesitated, recalling the sheer strength Ursa had displayed these past few days. Of course, she replied without hesitation. And since you were kind enough to look after me before, I will give this my all. Rhodes paled. Please don't give it your all. He immediately latched onto the most important part of her sentence. Ursa paused, then smiled. Don't worry. I understand. She reassured him. I won't be too harsh on my comrades. Rhodes glanced at Natsu and Gray. The looks on their faces said everything. She absolutely would be too harsh. At this point, Rhodes accepted his fate. It didn't really matter who he fought. He was going to lose either way. But between Natsu and Ursa, maybe Ursa would actually go a little easier on him. Master, open the bets. I'm putting my money on Ursa. Same here. Hurry up, Master. Makarov crossed his arms and flatly refused. No way. If Natsu had been fighting, someone might have actually bet on Rhodes, but against Ursa? Not a chance. If he took bets on this match, everyone would put their money on Ursa, and as the bookmaker, he'd be the one paying up. Ursa, go easy on him. Rhodes, just try to survive. We'll remember you. Rhodes. It was just a sparring match. Why did it sound like they were sending him off to his funeral? Do your best, Rhodes. Rhodes felt a bit of warmth in his heart. At least Myra was still supporting him like always. Wait. Why was she holding a medical kit? Alright. The second match, Rhodes vs. Ursa, begins. As soon as Makarov announced the match, Rhodes snapped into focus. There was no time to overthink things. He gripped his necklace and began chanting, I am the one who connects two worlds. You, creature of the Summoner's Rift, heed my call and pass through the gate. Rift Scuttle Crab. This time, his chant had been adjusted slightly, making it flow more naturally with his magic. Ripples spread across the ground like water, and a large green Rift Scuttle Crab emerged, its glossy shell gleaming under the sunlight. Oh. So this is another one of Rhodes' summons? It actually looks kind of strong. I thought he was gonna throw Worm in there to fight Ursa. Don't be ridiculous. Worm is strictly a spectator. Meanwhile, Ursa, ever the warrior, patiently allowed Rhodes to complete his summoning before lifting her hand. Requip. A flash of light enveloped her, and when it faded, a magic sword rested in her grip. Rhodes pointed at Ursa. Charge. The scuttle crab's claws clicked sharply as it surged forward with incredible speed, kicking up dust and dragging a faint afterimage in its wake. Rhodes had already seen what this thing could do. It could smash through courtyard walls without breaking a sweat. But against fairy tale's most destructive maniacs? This was just a warm-up. Ursa's eyes gleamed as she sized up the incoming creature. A speed type. Chapter 26, The Dagger Above Desire. Not bad, but... Ursa took 2 quick steps forward before launching herself into the air. She landed gracefully on the scuttle crab's head, using it as a stepping stone to propel herself straight toward Rhodes. The best way to deal with summoners is to target the mage directly. Huh? As someone who had barely fought before, Rhodes could only watch in stunned disbelief as Ursa closed the distance. In an instant, the sword in her hand vanished. Her right hand clenched into a fist. The next thing Rhodes knew, a sharp pain erupted in his forehead. His vision went dark, and his back hit the ground. Ursa landed lightly, standing over him. Come on, fight back with all your strength. Myra, who had calmly walked over with a medical kit, waved her hand with a smile. He can't stand up anymore. It's true. The onlookers had been impressed by the speed of Rhodes' scuttle crab earlier, but no one was surprised by the outcome. Even if they were in his place, they wouldn't have lasted any longer. This isn't really the best way to judge Rhodes' strength. Ursa's kind of overkill. Someone muttered. Makarov stroked his chin thoughtfully. For someone who's only been learning magic for a short time, his magic power level is quite good. His control is solid too. But his actual combat experience... He sighed. Yeah, that's basically non-existent. Still, he could see it. Rhodes had the potential to become one of the guild's strongest members. As for combat experience... Well, staying in Fairy Tale meant he'd have no shortage of that. Gray, help me out for a second. Myra placed a small pouch in front of Gray. Got it. Gray cracked his knuckles before pressing his right fist into his left palm. Ice make, ice pack. A cool blue glow pulsed from his hands, and in an instant, Myra's pouch was filled with fresh ice cubes. Meanwhile, Rhodes sat slumped on a stool at the counter, staring blankly at the floor. It's over. I embarrassed myself. Rhodes, lift your head. Rhodes instinctively obeyed. A sudden chill spread across his forehead. Hiss. He flinched slightly. His eyes darted up, catching sight of the neatly wrapped ice pack Myra had placed on him. With a gentle touch, she adjusted the towel around it, making sure it stayed in place. Myra leaned forward slightly, meeting Rhodes' gaze from behind. A soft smile curved her lips. Don't move. A little cold compress will help the swelling go down faster. Thanks. Rhodes reached up to hold the ice pack himself. Sensing his frustration, Myra reassured him. There's no shame in losing to Ursa. She's one of the strongest in the guild, after all. But I went through all that effort to chant such a long spell and summon such a cool crab. And she knocked me out with just one move. And she didn't even use a sword. Myra tilted her head playfully. Do you want her to use a sword? Ursa is the kind of person who barely knows how to hold back in a fight. Rhodes shuddered at the mental image of what that might look like. Yeah, never mind. Bang. A loud thud made Rhodes flinch. He turned his head, still pressing the ice pack to his forehead, and immediately sat up straight. Miss Ursa. Just call me Ursa. She said firmly before pressing her left fist to her chest in a solemn gesture. Her expression was deeply remorseful. I want to apologize. Rhodes blinked. Huh? I was too harsh on you. A sparring match is meant for training, yet I went all out against a guildmate who asked for a friendly duel. I showed no mercy. I practically bullied a newcomer. Rhodes panicked at her overly serious reaction and waved his hands frantically. And no. It wasn't that bad. No, your kindness only makes my actions seem worse. Ursa declared with conviction. With that, She turned to the large box she had slammed onto the counter earlier and opened it. The next moment, various medical supplies tumbled out. A lot of medical supplies. Bandages, band-aids, antiseptics, painkillers, anti-inflammatory ointments, practically an entire pharmacy in a box. Rhodes gawked at the pile. I bought every single trauma medicine they had at the pharmacy. Please, use them freely. Rhodes sighed, feeling both touched and overwhelmed. I appreciate the thought, but it's just a little bump. It only hurts a little. Really? I gave you such a headache. Please, let me find a way to make up for it. Did I say the wrong thing again? Rhodes shot a desperate look at Myra, silently pleading for help. Myra, clearly enjoying herself, chuckled as she explained, "Hers is just like this. She takes things very seriously. If you don't accept her medicine, she'll insist on bandaging you herself." Before Rhodes could object, Mirza had already came to a realization. I see now. Only by personally bandaging you can I properly express my apology. Wait, what? Requip. A flash of magical light engulfed Urza, and when it faded, she stood in a pristine nurse's uniform that perfectly accentuated her already striking figure. Ooh! A collective wolf howl erupted across the guild, and in an instant, dozens of men had hearts in their eyes. Urza, normally clad in armor, rarely showcased her more delicate side. Seeing her in a nurse's outfit reminded everyone that beyond her sheer strength, she was also undeniably gorgeous. If not for the very real fear of getting launched through the nearest wall, Wakaba and Mikau would have already run up to fawn over her. Alright, let's begin the bandaging. Mirza declared confidently, picking up a roll of bandages. Rhodes felt his heart skip a beat. Wait a second, maybe we don't have to. But as he spoke, his voice faltered. He found himself wavering. Part of him wanted to refuse, but another part was hesitating. Seeing Mirza unravel the bandage, he internally berated himself for being so weak-willed. And then... Mirza may have been dressed as a nurse, but her bandaging technique was more suited for restraining prisoners. For a minor forehead injury like his, a little anti-swelling ointment and maybe a single wrap would have been enough. However, Mirza's bandaging had somehow wrapped around Rhodes' neck, pinned his arms to his sides, and completely bound his legs together. It was less like first aid and more like restraining a criminal. A murder. Cough, cough, cough. Rhodes choked as the bandages tightened around his throat, nearly cutting off his air supply. But strangely, some people in the tavern didn't seem alarmed at all. In fact, a few were looking at him with jealousy. Lucky bastard. If only I could get that kind of special treatment from Mirza. What a way to go. A warrior's death. Mirza, stop. Rhodes is going to suffocate. Myra, despite her amusement, quickly stepped in. It was her first time seeing Mirza attempt medical treatment, and she hadn't expected this. Fortunately, with Myra's intervention, Rhodes was saved just before his eyes rolled into the back of his head. Mirza, looking genuinely remorseful, gave a deep bow. I'm sorry. My medical skills have gotten a little rusty. No, you're just way too proficient in combat instead. Rhodes was so moved that his eyes welled up with tears. No, you're amazing. Thanks to your treatment, my forehead doesn't even hurt anymore. Really? Mirza's eyes lit up with an eager sparkle. Rhodes nodded furiously. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your treatment. I'll take care of the rest with my own recovery. Compared to his entire body feeling like it was on the verge of breaking, his forehead injury was practically nothing. That's great. Satisfied, Mirza finally switched back into her armor, leaving behind the massive box of medical supplies before striding away, looking pleased. Rhodes let out a long sigh, rubbing his sore arm as he gazed up at the ceiling in deep reflection. Lust truly is a blade hanging over one's head. He had learned his lesson. His soul had matured from this ordeal. Myra, standing nearby, simply smiled behind her hand, trying to stifle her laughter. Chapter 27, Invitation and Rejection. Mirza seemed to have something important to do and left the tavern without another word. The moment she was gone, Natsa sprang back to life, full of energy. Alright, Roddy. Let's fight. It's Rhodes. Rhodes corrected, sighing. He quickly added. You saw what happened just now. I'm weak. Mirza took me out with a single punch. Happy, the Blue Exceed, eagerly chimed in. That's fine. Natsa challenged Mirza before, and she knocked him out with one punch too. You talk too much, Happy. Natsa growled, puffing up his chest. I'm not the same as before. Now I can definitely. Happy covered his mouth and muttered under his breath. He can definitely last a few more punches this time. What was that? Natsa turned red with anger, looking ready to fight Happy first. Happy quickly darted behind Myra, peeking out with a smug grin. Myra simply smiled, drawing a freshly washed glass, unfazed by their antics. Anyway, fight me. Your crab looks pretty strong. Rhodes hesitated for a moment before replying. Tomorrow. I need to rest. The real reason? He had no desire to get beaten up twice. Possibly 3 times. In the same day. His body still ached. Then it's a deal. Natsu declared before dashing off, already excited for their upcoming match. But Happy didn't leave immediately. He perched himself on the counter, looking at Rhodes with an unusually serious expression. So, you use summoning magic? Rhodes nodded. Yeah, that's right. Happy's eyes sparkled with anticipation. His mouth started to water. Then. Can you summon fish? Rhodes blinked, then mentally ran through the creatures he could summon. Probably not. The closest thing I have is a toad. Happy instantly deflated, his whole body slumping in disappointment. He slouched in the corner of the counter, a dark aura of despair surrounding him. Lost. Completely lost. Rhodes couldn't help but chuckle at the sight. Is fish really that important? Happy suddenly raised his tiny fists in determination. Fish is the ultimate delicacy. All right. Rhodes relented, not wanting to get into a debate with a cat over seafood. Meanwhile, Worm, who seemed to take a liking to Happy, probably because they were similar in size, trotted over and rubbed against him. Before long, the 2 small creatures were playing together, rolling around and chasing each other in a flurry of cuteness. In the evening, Levy arrived at the guild and picked out a job request from the bulletin board alongside Jet and Droy. Afterward, she made her way to Rhodes to continue her studies in foreign scripts. Today, I'll teach you 2 slightly more complex characters. The symbol for fist and the one for pain. Borrowing Levy's light pen, Rhodes carefully wrote out the 2 characters, tracing each stroke while explaining their meanings. Why these 2 words all of a sudden? Levy asked, curious. Rhodes hesitated. Let's just say, I was inspired. Oh, by the way, I heard you had a duel with Riza today. Her expression was a mix of admiration and amusement, as if she couldn't decide whether to be impressed by his courage or baffled by his recklessness. The corners of her lips twitched as she struggled to keep a straight face. Rhodes sighed. Go ahead. If you want to laugh, just do it. Levy finally let out a small chuckle, covering her mouth. Haha. No, I'm not laughing at you. Haha. It's just. I'm happy to be learning new characters. Rhodes didn't feel offended. There was no malice in her laughter, just good-natured amusement. With a resigned sigh, he changed the subject. By the way, about the enchanted glasses. Levy shook her head. Keep them for now. I have a spare pair, and I'll be out on a job tomorrow, so I probably won't need them for a while. You just got back 2 or 3 days ago, and you're already heading out again? That's pretty dedicated. Well, the last job didn't pay much, and I also spent a few days sightseeing in the city where the request was posted. In truth, Levy's team wasn't among the strongest in Fairy Tail, which meant they often took on lower-risk jobs with more modest rewards. That, of course, meant less money. Since their team had 3 members, any job's payment had to be split among them, which meant they had to work a little harder than most other guild members. Even so, it was enough to make Rhodes envious. I wonder how long it'll take before I can start taking on higher-paying missions. Levy offered a suggestion. If you're looking for a job, why not join our Shadow Gear team this time? The pay is pretty good. Rhodes was tempted for a brief moment but quickly shook his head. No, I'd just hold you guys back. My strength isn't there yet. It's fine. This mission isn't about combat. It's an expedition into the mountains to solve some puzzles and hunt for treasure. It's more about using your brain than brute force. Levy winked playfully and held up 2 fingers. The pay is 200,000 jewels. Rhodes gulped. Not because of Levy's adorable gesture, but because the pay was far too tempting. If split among the 4 of them, that meant 50,000 jewels each. That was half of his monthly stipend. But it was an expedition into the mountains. I think I'll pass. Thanks, though. I don't think I'm ready for that yet. Is that so? Levy tilted her head but didn't press him further. What a shame. Rhodes forced a bitter smile. The memory of being attacked by wild beasts when he first arrived in this world, coupled with Riz's devastating punch earlier, weighed on his mind. Until he built up real strength, he had no intention of stepping beyond the safety of Magnolia. Makarov, who had been resting with his eyes closed, peeked at Rhodes from the corner of his eye. This kid. He's another problem child. After finishing his shift at the guild, Rhodes didn't head straight home. Instead, he jogged along the main road outside the guild hall. After a light warm-up, he picked up the pace, steadily increasing his speed. Train your body, or you'll regret it. The master's words echoed in Rhodes' mind. He figured that just doing push-ups before bed was too half-hearted. Adding a running routine seemed like a better plan. He summoned a scuttle to carry the large box of medical supplies that Riza had sent to his home. The box itself seemed custom-made, with the fairy tale emblem painted on it. Given that, he doubted anyone would dare touch it, even if he left it outside the door. Rhodes took off running through the residential area near the guild, hopping down a nearly 2-meter-high stone step with ease and landing in another neighborhood. From there, he followed the main road until he reached the canal that ran through Magnolia. In the distance, he could see the tallest structure on the opposite bank. The Cathedral of Cardia. The streets surrounding the church were part of Magnolia's city center, which meant the Fairy Tale Guild Hall was built on the outskirts. That probably explained why his rent was cheaper. It was a bit further from the heart of the city. Instead of heading toward the bustling center, Rhodes continued running alongside the canal, pushing himself until his heart pounded, his breath came in short gasps, and sweat trickled down his face. He wasn't sure how far he had gone, but he had been counting his steps. More than 3,000. To his surprise, his stamina seemed better than before he came to this world. Back in his old life, he would have been gasping for air after running 3 laps around a school track. Now, he was noticeably stronger. In the past, the burning sensation in his lungs would have forced him to stop. But now, he knew this was just the beginning. Real training wasn't just about building strength. It was about strengthening his willpower. Every time he felt like he was at his limit, he just had to push a little further. Even running an extra 100 meters was progress. Of course, for someone as physically weak as him, talking about willpower felt a bit ridiculous. To the more experienced fighters in the guild, this distance was barely a warm-up, while for him, it was already a battle of endurance. His legs had become so sluggish that he had to rely on the motion of twisting his waist and hips to keep going. Meanwhile, Worm, the disloyal little guy, had initially run beside him, moving his tiny legs in an adorable attempt to keep up. But before long, he decided that Rhodes' shoulders made for a much better ride. Rhodes didn't hesitate to send him back. He wasn't ready to train with extra weight just yet. The sky was overcast, and as the sun set, only a faint glow remained behind the clouds. "Keep going, young man." A boatman rowing upstream on the canal called out to him with an encouraging smile. Rhodes mustered the energy to lift his sore arm in response before focusing on his willpower training once more. The people here were surprisingly friendly. Chapter 28, Rainy Days. Time to feel emo. A new day had arrived. Rhodes woke up to the steady patter of rain against his window. The moment he climbed out of bed, a wave of soreness shot through his legs, making him wince. Maybe it was the intense training yesterday. Maybe it was his stubbornness kicking in. Either way, he had pushed himself to the limit. Running until he literally collapsed and couldn't get back up. By the time he made it home, he had to summon a rift scuttle just to roll him onto its back and carry him the rest of the way. Before bed, he had the foresight to apply a cold compress and use some of the anti-swelling medicine from the oversized medical supply box Rosa had given him. Now, as he stood there, barely able to move, he was thankful for his own precautions. Dragging his aching legs, Rhodes hobbled to the bathroom to take care of his morning routine. Afterward, he figured it wouldn't hurt to apply more medicine. Then, oh no, I forgot to bring in the laundry. Rhodes hurried to the balcony. Sure enough, the rain had picked up overnight, and all his clothes were soaked through. Sighing, he gathered them up and tossed them into a basin, adding in the sweaty clothes he had taken off yesterday. He stared at the basin for a long moment before resigning himself to his fate. With a sigh, he sat down and started scrubbing. There was no other choice. Aside from these 2 sets of clothes and his pajamas, he only had one more outfit left in his closet. Every time he opened it, it felt painfully empty. If something unexpected happened, he would soon be facing a crisis. Running out of clothes entirely. I should buy a couple more sets when I have extra money, he muttered to himself. After washing and wringing out the clothes, he hung them in the laundry room for now. For a fleeting second, he considered taking them to the guild and asking Natsu to dry them with his flames. But he quickly abandoned the idea. The risk was too high. He wasn't ready to take that gamble. After all the morning chores, Rhodes finally packed up and headed downstairs, ready to make his way to the guild. But as soon as he stepped outside, he realized a new problem. The rain wasn't letting up. In fact, it was coming down harder. Even Goodman, who usually set up his stall rain or shine, was nowhere to be seen today. Then, the real issue hit him. I never bought an umbrella. I am so miserable. Rhodes let out a pitiful sigh. Hurrah! At the critical moment, Worm proudly pulled out an umbrella from a corner on the first floor. Good job. Rhodes praised, quickly summoning a rift scuttler and hopping onto its back, umbrella in hand, before setting off toward the guild. Before leaving, he made sure to leave a note for Goodman, letting him know that he had borrowed the umbrella without permission. The rift scuttler moved steadily down the rain-soaked streets, unfazed by the downpour. In fact, it seemed to enjoy the wet environment, its movements smooth and unhurried. Rhodes sat cross-legged on the highest part of the scuttler's back, angling his umbrella to shield himself from the incoming raindrops. The streets of Magnolia were much quieter in the rain. The usual lively morning market sounds were gone, replaced only by the occasional hurried footsteps of pedestrians. Most people carried umbrellas or wore raincoats and boots, quickly making their way through the puddles. Rhodes had seen this kind of scenery countless times before, back in his original world. But as he glanced down at himself, riding a giant crab through the rain, he couldn't help but feel a little out of place. Right. He was never truly a part of this world to begin with. That fleeting moment of reflection vanished the second he reached the guild's entrance. Because at that moment, he spotted Lockie approaching from the northwest intersection, holding a traditional wooden umbrella in one hand and a wooden box in the other. Her purple hair swayed gently as she walked, and the light drizzle gave her an almost serene appearance. On the other side, Gray was also making his way toward the guild. His umbrella was a masterfully sculpted construct of ice. Rain trickled down the surface of Gray's ice umbrella, neither freezing nor melting, but instead forming tiny droplets that cascaded like a beaded curtain along the edges. Noticing Rhodes and Lockie, Gray casually raised a hand in greeting. "Yo." Lockie responded cheerfully. "Good morning." "Morning." Rhodes replied as his rift scuttler disappeared, bringing him back to solid ground. Looking at his two guildmates, who were just as unique as he was, he couldn't help but smile. Maybe this is what being in a guild truly means. The three of them stepped through the guild's entrance, and Lockie glanced at the floor near the doorway. "Looks like I'll have to mop the floor a lot today." She sighed. Thinking about how cafeterias and shops handled rainy days, Rhodes made a suggestion. "How about putting down some extra wooden boards at the entrance?" "Great idea. Let's do that, but..." Lockie lifted her hand and cast a spell. "Would make pure love, spotless." With a swift motion, thin wooden planks materialized inside and outside the guild entrance, their upper surfaces deliberately rough to prevent slipping. "Would make magic is really convenient." Rhodes mused, though he couldn't help but internally criticize the ridiculous spell name. Wouldn't clean souls, spotless have made more sense. With little happening in the morning, Rhodes busied himself for a while before seeking out Gray. "Natsu's weakness?" Gray immediately responded. "He's hot-headed, gets riled up easily, and is basically a reckless fire idiot." Then, after a brief moment of thought, Gray added. "But while he's impulsive in everyday life, it's different in battle. In a fight, his instincts are sharp, almost like a wild beast. If you take him seriously, he's a real pain to deal with." Though Gray constantly bickered with Natsu, if he had to evaluate him as a fighter, he'd give him high marks. Of course, he'd never admit that in front of Natsu. "That's what I was afraid of." Rhodes groaned. "Looks like I'm getting beat up again today. Is there really no direct, obvious, and immediate weakness I can exploit?" Gray suddenly clapped his hands together. "Oh, right. Natsu challenged you to a duel today." His interest piqued. Mostly because he liked seeing Natsu get knocked around. Gray leaned in. "Actually, he does have a major weakness." "Really?" Rhodes' eyes lit up. "Yeah." Gray smirked. "That guy's useless when it comes to transportation. Just get him on a moving vehicle, and you've already won." "That's actually a great idea." Rhodes started to nod before realizing a flaw in the plan. "But I don't know how to create a vehicle with magic." "Then I'll teach you." "Right now?" "Yes, right now." Gray's enthusiasm spiked as he raised his hands. His shirt instantly vanishing. "All right, follow my lead." Rhodes glanced at Gray's bare torso, completely unfazed. "You know what? I think ice make magic just isn't for me." Becoming a pervert just to defeat Natsu, Rhodes decided it wasn't worth it. Gray pressed his right fist against the palm of his left hand, staring in confusion as Rhodes abruptly turned and fled. "Huh? But I haven't even started teaching yet." Not wanting to risk another questionable training session with Gray, Rhodes decided to find a quiet place to meditate for a while. Before he could go far, Lockie called out to him. "Rhodes." She walked over and handed him a wooden box. "Here, this is the magazine collection you asked for." As soon as he took it, Rhodes' arm nearly sank under the weight. "This is heavy," he muttered, struggling slightly. There had to be over 50 magazines inside. "Thanks, but why doesn't the box have an opening?" "Because it's raining," Lockie explained casually. "I was worried the magazines might get wet, so I sealed it shut." "So how am I supposed to open it?" "Once you get somewhere dry, just give the box a good hit." Rhodes blinked. "Oh, I see. That's very thoughtful." Did she really mean he had to smash it open when he got home? His grasp of the local language still had gaps, so he needed a moment to process what she meant. Now that he thought about it, Lockie had probably crafted this box before leaving home. Would make magic really was practical for daily life. Rhodes secured the box and made his way toward the library entrance. He sat down cross-legged, closed his eyes, and started meditating. Feeling his magic power slowly but steadily growing, he experienced the quiet satisfaction of progress. I wonder what my next summon will be. He mused to himself. Hopefully, the next one would actually have some real attack power. Chapter 29, Rhodes vs. Natsu. Let's go, Rhodes. Time to fight. Natsu didn't bother with pleasantries. He went straight to the point, as always. Rhodes sighed. Can't we at least wait until the rain stops? Natsu tilted his head. Hasn't it already stopped? Huh? Rhodes glanced toward the entrance. The sun peeked through the gaps between the dark clouds, like golden threads weaving through the sky. Within moments, the dark clouds scattered, and a brilliant blue sky emerged. Rhodes was dumbfounded. What the? Are you on Okakozaka? Who's that? Is she strong? In a way. Rhodes decided not to explain. He took a deep breath and nodded. Alright, let's do this. Natsu eagerly leaped into the backyard, stomping his foot down twice, his excitement palpable. Rhodes, however, hesitated. The backyard was still soaked from the rain, and Natsu's feet splashed mud everywhere. He quickly spun around and called out. Lucky? Lucky gave him a thumbs up. Leave it to me. With a flick of her fingers, she cast her magic. Would make, pure love spotless. A 10-meter-wide wooden platform sprouted from the ground, forming a solid arena in the middle of the backyard. The moment the spell finished, murmurs of discontent rose from the crowd. Lucky, could you please stop naming your spells like that? Someone complained. Humphrey, I think it's perfect. Lucky replied smugly, crossing her arms. Natsu hopped onto the wooden platform and stomped his foot twice, testing its sturdiness. He grinned. Oh, nice. Alright, new rule. Falling off the platform means you lose. Rhodes crossed his arms. Or, we could just say whoever hits the ground first loses. He would rather fake a fall than roll around in the mud. Natsu didn't seem to care either way. The crowd gathered, buzzing with excitement. Somewhere in the mix, Makarov had already set up the betting pool. Rhodes had no idea when he even got there. Alright then, let's get this started. Makarov declared. Natsu versus Rhodes. Fight. Rhodes gripped the pendant around his neck, taking a deep breath. I am the one who connects the two worlds. Scuttle Crab. Natsu, like Ursa, followed the warrior's code and didn't go for a sneak attack. But for Rhodes, the lengthy chant felt like a serious flaw. He needed to figure out how to shorten it soon. As soon as the Scuttle Crab appeared, Natsu couldn't hold back any longer. He clashed his fists together, flames erupting from his knuckles. With a single step, he charged forward like a fire dragon pouncing on its prey. Fire Dragon's iron fist. But his target wasn't Rhodes. It was the Scuttle Crab. The blazing fist expanded in Rhodes' vision, instinctively making him raise his arms in a futile attempt to shield himself, only to realize he was seeing through the crab's eyes. Panicked, he failed to give a command in time. The crab reacted on pure instinct, raising one of its stubby claws to block. Natsu's flaming punch smashed into the green shell, and the surge of heat sent embers flying dangerously close to the crab's beady eyes. The force of the impact drove the crab's 6 legs deep into the wooden platform, skidding it backward by more than 2 meters. Splinters and dirt scattered everywhere, some of it belting Rhodes, who found himself half sprawled on the crab's back. If not for the bumpy ridges on its shell giving him something to grip, he might have been flung off completely. Ugh! Rhodes groaned, his stomach twisting. If that punch had landed on him directly, he might have been knocked out. Or worse. Noting his reaction, Makarov decided to offer the rookie a quick lesson. Magic power isn't just for casting spells. It's also for defense. Even if you don't know any defensive magic, channeling your magic can still act as a shield. It won't be as efficient, but it'll save your skin in a pinch. Rhodes nodded, processing the information. So it was kind of like internal energy in martial arts but less cost-effective than a proper defense spell. Scuttle Crab, charge. But his command came a fraction too late. The Scuttle Crab, still rattled from the hit, acted on instinct and bolted straight in the opposite direction. It even left behind an illusory shimmer as it dashed away. Probably some kind of minor acceleration ability. Betrayed by his own summon, Rhodes now found himself face to face with Natsu, barely 3 meters apart. The moment he shouted his command again, the Scuttle Crab spun around and rushed back. So fast. Natsu had initially planned to rush forward and greet Rhodes with a casual punch. Just a friendly strike without any fire, but the Scuttle Crab's speed took him by surprise. Watching it from the sidelines yesterday was one thing. Facing it head-on was another. This is fun. Natsu grinned, his excitement flaring up as he spread his arms wide and caught the Scuttle Crab's massive pincers in his hands. TSK. The sheer force of the crab's charge made his sandals scrape noisily against the wooden floor. Natsu skidded back nearly a meter before planting his feet firmly. His grin widened. Got you. Heat surged through his body as flames burst from his limbs. Without hesitation, he lunged forward and smashed his forehead into the scuttle crab's face. Fire Dragon's sword horn. Squeak. With a loud bang, the scuttle crab flipped over, its body engulfed in roaring flames. The sudden burst of heat made it screech in protest, limbs flailing in the air. Before it could struggle much, its form began to shimmer. The fiery glow faded as the crab's body turned transparent before vanishing completely. Ah! Oops! Natsu clutched his head with both hands, rubbing his scalp in frustration. I went too far. Panic set in as he turned to Rhodes, clasping his hands together in a frantic apology. Sorry. He bowed repeatedly, his words coming out in a rush. I didn't mean to finish it off. I just got excited. Sorry. Rhodes, however, remained calm. It's fine. It's not dead. Really? Natsu paused mid-bow, looking up with wide eyes. Yeah, really. Think of it like it got forcefully sent back. It just needs time to recover. At that moment, Rhodes could vaguely sense a familiar presence. A body of water in the distance. The scuttle crab was lurking beneath the surface, only its long antennae poking above the waves. In the game, it would probably just be considered waiting for a respawn. However, seeing the scuttle crab disappear this time made Rhodes feel like its existence was fundamentally different from that of Poro. So that's how it works. Natsu leaped backward, grinning eagerly. Alright then. Let's go again. What other monsters do you have? Summon them all. Ha ha ha. This guy is way too stubborn. His mood shift was absurdly fast. But then again, that kind of relentless spirit fits the classic shonen protagonist perfectly. Rhodes was starting to get a better grasp of Natsu's personality, but continuing to summon more creatures, he glanced over at Poro, who had been watching from the sidelines. The little creature immediately scurried behind Happy, coincidentally using him as a shield. Rhodes sighed. Yeah, no chance. Clenching his fists, he looked straight at Natsu. Alright then, let's do this properly. The whole point of sparring with Natsu was to gain real combat experience. If he backed down now just because he was scared of getting hit, what was the point? Natsu raised a fist and gave Rhodes a wide, confident grin. But later, whenever Rhodes recalled this moment, he always felt like Natsu's smile looked disturbingly similar to that of a devil. Damn it, he hits way too hard. Later. HMGH. Ugh. That hurts. Myra gently dabbed a cotton ball soaked in medicine against the swollen side of Rhodes' face, holding it in place with a pair of tweezers. Rhodes sat on the chair, gripping the backrest tightly with both hands, his expression twisted in pain. At first, he'd been a little flustered about how close they were, but now, he didn't care. His entire body just hurt. Hang in there, it'll be over soon. Myra reassured him, dipping a fresh cotton ball into the healing potion. Didn't you use that defensive trick the master taught you? I tried. But I didn't master it all in one go. And... Ow. Who knew he'd go straight for my face first thing? Myra giggled. Yeah. Natsu fights like that. She pressed the cotton ball against his cheek one last time. Alright, now turn around. Rhodes sighed and turned, pulling his collar down to reveal the fresh bruises on his shoulder and back. Thinking back to the painful experience, he grimaced before nodding with determination. The more this happens, the more I have to keep training. It's better to get beaten up here in the guild than to get killed when I'm out in the real world. NGH. Ow. Chapter 30, the next target I can handle the rest myself. After Myra had helped him apply medicine to the areas he couldn't reach, Rhodes felt bad about relying on her too much. Alright then, I'll step out for now. Myra said, setting down the medicine bottle and tweezers. Take it easy and rest for a while. Yeah, thanks. As Myra left, Rhodes watched the door for a moment before sighing. He pulled off his t-shirt, revealing his bruised torso, and began carefully applying the ointment himself. At the same time, he mentally reviewed his fight with Natsu. Aside from leaving him sore all over, today's spar had actually taught him quite a bit. For one, he could now say he'd been in a proper fight. An important milestone. At the very least, he wouldn't feel nervous just hearing the word battle anymore. He also picked up the basics of using magic defensively. Right now, it was still difficult to withstand Natsu's punches using just his magic power, but if he were up against a regular person, he was confident he could block their attacks effectively. During the fight, Rhodes had instinctively mirrored Natsu's movements. When Natsu threw a punch to the face, he did the same. When Natsu sidestepped and drove an elbow toward his ribs, Rhodes followed suit. Of course, apart from landing 2 solid hits, Rhodes hadn't actually managed to accomplish much. Now that he thought about it, Natsu had clearly been holding back. giving him openings to attack and barely dodging or blocking at all. So, in terms of total punches thrown and landed, their numbers weren't that far apart. But in the end, Rhodes had been left sprawled on the ground, unable to move, while Natsu dusted himself off like nothing had happened before, casually carrying him to the infirmary. Thinking about it like this, it feels like Natsu was deliberately acting as my sparring partner. Rhodes glanced at his bruises and let out a hopeless chuckle. I have to thank him after getting beat up. What kind of nonsense is that? Although, when he went after the scuttle crab, that definitely wasn't training. It was just pure curiosity and excitement. And that strange sensation when the crab disappeared, I need to look into that more carefully. After resting in the infirmary for a bit, Rhodes finally stood up and made his way toward the tavern to help out. Inside, Myra and Lockie were already busy, but there was also another girl assisting with the service. She had short black hair in the front, giving her a bit of a tomboyish look, but in the back, she had a long braid tied neatly down her back. She wore a fitted red cheongsam, and her black knee-high socks bore the fairy tale emblem at the top. Rhodes recognized her. Her name was Sally. She used magic to switch her equipment, though she wasn't as proficient as Rizza. Rather than full armor swaps, she could only change her weapons during battle. It was said that her specialty was a pair of steel claws attached to her wrists. Clearly, she was a melee fighter, and from what Rhodes had heard, a particularly fierce one. Unlike Rhodes, Sally didn't take many shifts at the tavern. Being a waitress was just a side gig for her. Her real income came from teaming up with 3 other friends to take on missions. Aside from Sally, there was another girl named Izzy, who was in a similar situation. However, Rhodes had only seen her once before, back when he was still struggling with the language, so he wasn't very familiar with her. Rhodes? I heard you fought Natsu today, Sally said, balancing a tray in one hand while flashing a steel claw on the other. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. How about it? Want to go around with me next? Clearly, she was another battle maniac. Rhodes immediately refused. Please spare me. I'm sore all over. Sally, where's my drink? Someone in the tavern called out impatiently, breaking her train of thought. TCH, so annoying. Can't you just come get it yourself? She snapped. Yeah, probably best not to provoke her if possible. Even if she wasn't that strong, she could definitely still wipe the floor with Rhodes in his current state. Deciding to play it safe, Rhodes made his way to the counter and waited. At that moment, Gray was leaning against the bar, a mission request form spread out in front of him as Myra prepared to register it. Hey, Natsu hits pretty hard, huh? Gray smirked as he glanced at Rhodes. Yeah. Rhodes touched his swollen cheek with a wry smile. Where is he, anyway? Took a job and headed out with Happy. Gray picked up the signed request form that Myra handed back to him and waved it at Rhodes. I'm heading out too. Catch you later. Rhodes nodded. Yeah, be careful out there. Gray had barely taken a few steps when Myra suddenly called after him. Gray, your clothes. Gray glanced down, only to realize he was standing there in just a pair of loose shorts. What? When? Laughing as Gray scrambled to retrieve his missing shirt and pants, Myra poured Rhodes a glass of water and slid it toward him. You seem to care a lot about Natsu, she observed. Rhodes didn't answer right away. He simply held the glass, watching the water ripple gently inside. I guess so. After all, he's been taking care of me. Rhodes sighed, his expression slightly conflicted. It's just a little awkward. It was natural to feel uneasy after getting beaten, but considering how Natsu had held back in various ways, whether intentionally or not, while also teaching him a few fighting techniques, Rhodes felt he should be grateful. Still, it was a little awkward knowing that Natsu was probably younger than him. Rhodes realized he had a tendency to overthink things. Unlike the others, who were more straightforward, he often found himself caught up in his own thoughts. That led to another problem. Was he out of place here? Would he end up being excluded because he didn't quite fit in? Then, he'd start feeling frustrated with himself. He was already an adult, yet he still worried about things like this. And to make it worse, everyone else treated him so sincerely, while he sat here overanalyzing everything. He almost felt guilty for it. Myra watched his shifting expressions and assumed he was simply struggling to accept his loss. You've only been learning magic for a few days. The fact that you can already fight like this is impressive. She encouraged him with a warm smile. If you keep up this pace, you might even be able to take on some smaller jobs next month. Yeah. I should just focus on training for now. Rhodes muttered. Who knew how things would turn out? Maybe he just needed to get used to fighting. His gaze drifted across the bustling tavern, landing on a boy with neatly parted hair. Max, the chatterbox from this morning. Maybe I should ask him next time. Between work, training, and enjoying the guild chef's amazing cooking, The rest of the day passed in a satisfying blur. When he got home, Rhodes followed Lockie's instructions and smashed open the sealed wooden box to retrieve the magazines inside. Sorcerer Weekly was a well-known publication, and what Lockie had given him was an entire year's worth, plus some bonus editions and special issues. Altogether, about 60 copies. The stack of magazines stood neatly on his table, more than a foot tall. Rhodes glanced at the now empty wooden box, running a hand over its smooth surface. Seems like a waste to just throw this away. How about making it into your new nest? He held the box up, showing it to Worm. The box wasn't large, but it was just the right size for a Poro to curl up inside. However, Worm didn't seem to like this makeshift nest. He shook his head and scurried away, retreating under the bed. Fine, fine. Rhodes sighed. Just don't roll around in the dust. I haven't cleaned under there properly yet. Deciding it was useless, he tossed the broken wooden box into the fireplace to save it as firewood. Once again, he found himself envious of how convenient wood make magic was. He retrieved the enchanted glasses, put them on, and flipped open one of the magazines, quickly skimming through the content. Phantom Lord. This was a feature on one of the two most famous wizard guilds in the Kingdom of Fiore. The other, of course, was Fairy Tale. For a long time, Fairy Tale had remained relatively quiet in terms of notoriety, but in recent years, its reputation had skyrocketed. Rhodes learned this from a weekly magazine issue that was heavily focused on Phantom Lord. In terms of scale and membership, Phantom Lord was far larger than Fairy Tale. In addition to its headquarters, the guild had more than 20 branch locations and a massive number of wizards under its banner. Phantom Lord, huh? Rhodes mused, frowning slightly. That name makes it sound more like a dark guild. But after reading about several of Phantom Lord's top wizards, and the various accidents they had caused, his suspicions eased slightly. This guild was at least as chaotic as Fairy Tale, if not more. Chapter 31, a little gossip. After flipping through a couple of magazines, Rhodes took off his glasses, stretching his arms as he prepared to start his daily physical training. I told you not to crawl under the bed. Rhodes lifted Worm by the scruff of his neck. The little creature hung there limply, his 4 tiny legs dangling in the air, tongue slightly sticking out, and little horns drooping pitifully as if pleading to be spared from scolding. Actually, this works out perfectly, Rhodes said, placing Worm down before heading to the laundry room to grab a basin of water and a rag. Worm sat obediently on the floor, assuming Rhodes was about to clean his fur. Instead, Rhodes tossed the rag to him. You're already covered in dust anyway, so help me clean under the bed. It's too much of a hassle for me. Worm? If you get it done before I get back, I'll buy you some cookies tomorrow. Good luck. Worm hesitated before reluctantly gripping the rag with his tiny paws. With that settled, Rhodes shut the door behind him and jogged downstairs. Today's route was slightly adjusted. Now that he understood his limits, he planned his turning points better, ensuring he'd be completely exhausted just as he reached home. At the start of the run, he was still thinking about his training plan and whether he should buy a sandbag to practice his punches. By the second half of the run, his only thought was, one more step. Just one more step. Still, this kind of training was proving effective. At least Rhodes had become increasingly proficient at applying cold compresses and treating minor injuries. Dragging his legs, which now felt like they were made of lead, he finally reached his apartment. Using the handrail for support, he climbed the stairs, only to be greeted by the sight of a little gray dog squatting at his door. You actually cleaned it? That's impressive. Rhodes praised. Too exhausted to stand any longer, he staggered toward the bed and collapsed onto it. The first thought that popped into his head was, great. I'm drenched in sweat. Now I have to change the sheets. Worm tilted his head, tongue hanging out, seemingly pondering something. Then, he hopped onto the chair, leaped onto the table, and skillfully grabbed the medicine bottle Rhodes had used the night before. With another nimble jump, he landed on the bed and presented it to him. Thanks. Rhodes mustered the strength to prop himself up and take the bottle, but as he did, his eyes immediately locked onto the gray smudge left by Worm on the sheets. Worm looked guilty under Rhodes' gaze. He slowly stepped back, then leaped off the bed, only to leave a few more dusty footprints in his wake. Rhodes sighed. All right, let's get you cleaned up first. The summer dawn arrived early, filling the room with soft, golden light. When Rhodes opened his eyes, the sun was already up. As expected, Worm, who had been curled up beside his pillow the night before, had vanished once again. Rhodes still hadn't figured out whether this was due to his magic supply cutting off while he slept or if his summoned creatures simply had a time limit before they returned to their original space. Stretching his sore limbs, he slipped on his slippers and let out a satisfied sigh. His legs ached from yesterday's training, but the distinct increase in his magic power made it all feel worthwhile. Maybe it was because his magical reserves were still relatively small, but every bit of progress felt significant. As long as he kept working hard, the results were immediate. Ding. MP limit plus 10. Rhodes silently narrated in his mind, pretending he had a leveling system like in a game. The boost in magic was exciting, but what truly thrilled him was what he had discovered last night while meditating. When he tried to connect with the scuttle crab through his necklace, he not only saw the one he had summoned diving underwater, but also glimpsed the entire river channel it lived in. And another scuttle crab patrolling leisurely downstream. It was as if the second one was keeping watch over its territory. Rhodes felt confident that he could summon this second crab whenever he wanted. And when the first one fully recovered from its injuries, would that mean he could summon two at the same time? He checked his magic reserves. Yeah, still need a few more days of training for that. With his next goal set, he washed up, changed into fresh clothes, and stepped outside. As usual, he greeted Goodman, then held up his pendant and channeled his magic. Come on out, Worm. On his way to the guild, Rhodes didn't forget to pick up a pack of biscuits for Worm. Funds reduced by 500 jewels. As he watched Worm happily roll its tongue and swallow a biscuit whole, Rhodes began contemplating a feeding plan. In League of Legends, Poros needed special treats. Poro snacks. To grow stronger. They looked like biscuits, but what exactly were they made of? Should I try different ingredients and see if Worm can tell which ones are good? That seemed like a reasonable approach. Lost in thought, Rhodes soon arrived at the Fairy Tale Guild. He handled his usual cleaning duties before heading to the backyard with Max, who he had arranged to spar with the previous day. Rhodes had already done some digging on Max's abilities. He wielded sand magic. Great for defense, but not particularly strong in terms of offense. As for his overall strength, Myra had tactfully put it as not very impressive compared to Ursa. That was her polite way of saving face for Max. But after thinking it over, Rhodes realized she likely meant that Max wasn't all that impressive compared to the entire guild. Then, as expected, Rhodes lost again. Unlike Natsu, Max couldn't take down the scuttle crab with a single strike, but he could stop its charge. When the summoned crab slammed into a sturdy sand wall, the impact sent a dull thud echoing across the backyard. Before it could recover, several sand tendrils shot out, wrapping tightly around its legs and restricting its movement. It looks like this guy is more of a utility summon than a real combat monster. Rhodes admitted to himself, finally solidifying the crab's role in his strategy. Max dusted off his hands and stepped toward Rhodes. Want to go another round? Rhodes adjusted his stance, exhaled, and nodded. There was no way he could win. 2 fights. How could that possibly compare to people who had been brawling on a regular basis for years? Even someone like Max, who wasn't exactly a powerhouse in the guild, could still easily defeat Rhodes. The only saving grace was that Max was considerate enough to hold back during their sparring session, making sure not to leave any bruises or lasting injuries. In his own words, I don't want a friend I just made to avoid me the next day. For someone as talkative as Max, having an audience was important. Rhodes figured that since Max liked chatting, he might as well indulge him for 10 minutes before starting work. It wasn't a bad deal. After all, getting more information and improving his common language skills through conversation was something he needed anyway. A way to increase magic power quickly? Max repeated, rubbing his chin. Nope, there's no such thing. The only way to grow your magic is through hard work and practice. He paused for a moment, then added. Oh, well, I guess as you get older, your magic power will naturally increase too. Take me, for example. I'm 16 now. In another 7 or 8 years, I'll definitely be super strong. Rhodes nodded absent-mindedly before Max suddenly asked. Hey, how old are you, Rhodes? Almost 19. Rhodes paused. Wait. How should I even calculate my age and birthday in this world? Max, meanwhile, seemed to be doing some quick mental math. 18, huh? So you're the same age as Ursa, Myra, Biska, and Alzik. He then patted Rhodes' shoulder in what seemed to be a reassuring gesture. Keep working hard. That wasn't reassuring at all. Max, however, was still going. Speaking of which, Biska hasn't been using magic for that long, and she's already holding her own. So there's no need to worry too much. Just keep working hard, and you'll get there. Rhodes wasn't paying full attention to Max anymore. His gaze had shifted to a green-haired girl chatting with Ursa. That was Biska. Though they hadn't officially introduced themselves, Loki had pointed her out to Rhodes before. Biska was good friends with Ursa and also used equip magic, but unlike Ursa's armored combat style, she specialized in summoning firearms. And then there was Myra's helpful, more like gossipy, input. Biska started learning equip magic because she idolized Ursa. Also, she has a thing for Alzik, the guy who specializes in gun magic. According to Myra's observations, Elzik sometimes stared at Biska's back a little too long, lost in thought. She's convinced they'll end up together sooner or later. At Myra's words, Rhodes had instinctively scanned the room and, sure enough, he spotted Elzik not far from Biska. The guy had a cowboy-esque look about him. Fit the whole gunman aesthetic. That was when another thought hit Rhodes. Not only does my guild have a bunch of weirdos, but it's also filled with ridiculously good-looking people. Chapter 32, Ancient Krug. Rhodes always dreaded the moment when he accidentally locked eyes with someone he didn't know. If he looked away too quickly, it might come off as rude. But if he held eye contact for too long, it could be seen as a challenge. This left him stuck in an awkward position. Especially now, when the man who had been staring at him put down his glass and started walking toward him. Luckily, Marcus was quick to break the tension. "Hey, Elzik. I was just talking about you." Elzik raised an eyebrow. "Talking about me?" "Yeah. This is Rhodes. You know him, right?" Elzik nodded. "The guy who destroyed an entire forest?" Marcus clapped his hands together. "That's the one." Rhodes nearly choked on his drink. "That's wrong." Both of them turned to look at him in confusion, as if wondering why he reacted so strongly. Realizing he might have overreacted, Rhodes raised a hand. "Sorry, that was unintentional." Now they looked even more confused. Did slamming the table really need an explanation? "Never mind," Rhodes muttered, deciding not to dwell on it. Taking a deep breath, he properly introduced himself to Elzik, then immediately tried to clear up the ridiculous rumor. He was just a rookie wizard who had only been learning magic for a few days. How could he possibly have the ability to destroy an entire forest? "The guild master told me the forest ended up that way because of a rampaging pack of beasts," Elzik said. "There were reports of strange birds, giant frogs, vicious wolves, and even flying dragons. Sounds like..." He paused. Rhodes froze. "That really does sound like my summons." A cold sweat formed on his back. Something wasn't right. Thinking back, Rhodes recalled that when he first heard about the destroyed forest, he hadn't even known he could summon creatures. After realizing his ability, he never gave it a second thought. But now, connecting the dots, could it be that when I was attacked by that bear, my magic spiraled out of control, and I ended up summoning every wild creature I had access to? The more he thought about it, the more anxious he felt. If it really was me, how much would I have to pay for all that damage? Just as his existential crisis deepened, Marcus and Elzik had already moved on to another topic. Marcus, clearly bored, was suggesting they organize some kind of event. After all, he was the guild's official host. He might as well put those skills to use. "How about a shooting competition?" Elzik suggested, casually patting the pistol at his waist. "Come on, who in the guild could even compete with you and Biska in a shooting contest?" Elzik instantly panicked. "Don't say that. Biska, I..." The poor guy was flustered beyond words. Rhodes listened to his frantic response with amusement, enjoying the little bit of gossip unfolding before him. As their conversation continued, Elzik somehow became Rhodes' next opponent. Over the next few days, Rhodes underwent one battle after another. Some fights were arranged by him, while others were set up by Marcus, who found too much joy in roping in new challengers. For fun, the guild members even took over the master's usual role as referee. Meanwhile, Kana, who had just returned from a mission, took over the guild master's gambling racket, happily collecting bets on each fight. For a time, the backyard of Fairy Tale had never been livelier. Of course, that also meant Rhodes and his opponents had to repair the walls a few times after their more destructive matches. However, as the fights grew more frequent, the excitement wore off. The audience dwindled, and enthusiasm faded. The biggest reason? The results were too predictable. At this point, Rhodes had fought 19 matches and lost all 19. Today was no different. Another loss. Rhodes slumped against the counter, resting on a round stool as he waited for his next shift. Warm, after wandering off to snack on food from the tavern, returned and hugged Rhodes' leg in an attempt to console him. Myra placed a small plate of broad beans on the counter and called Warm up for a treat. As she absent-mindedly combed his fluffy white fur, she spoke up. "Didn't you almost twin against Ritas today?" "Ritas went easy on me." Rhodes sighed. "I could tell he was holding back. It was hard for me to even land a hit." Rhodes had always been grateful to Ritas. His painting magic had helped Rhodes quickly grasp the current world and ease a lot of his uncertainties. But seriously, his magic is totally unfair. Rhodes groaned. "He can draw anything into existence. Compared to that, my summoning magic feels so stupid." Today, Ritas had sketched a scuttle crab, sending a crab to fight against a crab. At the same time, he still had the energy to draw a Poro, setting up an adorable face-off between his summoned creature and Warm. Even though the painted scuttle crabs weren't particularly strong and crumbled after just 1 or 2 hits, Ritas could summon them in endless waves. Under the relentless assault of these mass-produced imitation crabs, the two real scuttle crabs happily scuttled back toward the river in the canyon, leaving Rhodes frozen in place, staring in disbelief. He was beginning to think he might be developing a serious case of firepower deficiency phobia. Myra chuckled, watching his reaction. Painting magic has its limitations. Almost every action requires Ritas to split his focus and manually control his creations. She rested her chin in her palm and continued. But summoning magic is different. As long as you give your summons a command, they can act on their own, right? That's your advantage. She met Rhodes' eyes with a knowing smile. In a way, Ritas' biggest weakness is the same as yours. The fastest way to beat him is to target him directly. She twirled a lock of hair around her finger and added. And since he has to multitask while controlling his portraits, even if he's skilled in combat, he can't fight at full strength. Her voice softened. So once you get stronger, or summon something really powerful, you'll surpass Ritas soon enough. Rhodes blinked. Everyone else in the guild had only seen him lose these past few days. But Myra. She had seen something different. Unlike before, she hadn't needed to help him apply any bandages for several days now. Even after close combat training with Gray, he wasn't covered in bruises like when he fought Natsu. Sure, Gray probably held back more than Natsu had, but Myra could tell. Rhodes was getting smoother with his movements, parrying and counterattacking more naturally. His magic reserves had also increased, and his defensive techniques were improving with every fight. She wasn't the type to say things just to make people feel better. If she said he was getting stronger, then it was true. Rhodes felt comforted by her words. He realized something. Myra might say she wasn't a fighter, but she clearly understood battle far better than he did. The way she analyzed everything. It reminded him of how pro gamers would critique casual players, calling them bad while actually knowing way more than them. In this situation, he was the rookie, and Myra? She was the expert strategist. Rhodes let out a sigh, cracking a small smile. Well, I already know what my next summon will be, he admitted, crossing his arms. I was just venting. Even in games, losing 10 matches in a row was frustrating. So of course, in real combat, he was going to have some emotions about it. Thankfully, all the friendly matches over the past few days hadn't been in vain. The sweat he shed had not been wasted. While Rhodes was practicing summoning scuttle crabs with Ritas today, he suddenly felt a shift. A dark mist that had been obscuring part of Summoner's Rift cleared away, revealing a hidden valley. The ground was smooth and level, the rock walls high and polished, with patches of moss growing in the crevices, making the whole place feel damp and cold. And in the middle of this secluded valley, two large stones stood motionless. One big, one small. Rhodes, who knew the game mechanics well, immediately recognized them. Ancient Krugs. Often referred to as stone monsters, they were naturally tanky creatures, but their attack power wasn't something to be underestimated either. In fact, among all the regular monsters in Summoner's Rift, their offensive capability was quite high. What made them unique was their ability to split. When the ancient Krug was broken apart, it would divide into two smaller Krugs, and those would break down further into even tinier mini-Krugs. However, despite this exciting discovery, Rhodes decided against summoning them today in his match with Ritas. He might know their stats and abilities from the game, but this was real life. He had no idea how these creatures would behave once summoned. Would they listen to his commands? Or worse, what if they went berserk and attacked his guildmates? That would be a disaster. In a guild where recklessness was practically second nature, Rhodes firmly reminded himself of one important rule. Don't be the one who causes trouble for everyone. Chapter 33, Three Gates. Rhodes threw a punch, but his opponent swiftly dodged and countered with a sideways kick. Rhodes raised his arm to block the attack, but before he could react, his opponent vanished from sight. Hearing the faintest sound behind him, Rhodes quickly shifted his stance. Though he managed to evade most of the strike, his shoulder still took a glancing hit. He staggered slightly but regained his balance almost instantly, spinning around and throwing a counterpunch. Bang! His fist made solid contact. However, his opponent had already braced for impact, crossing his arms in an X shape to absorb the blow. That was a heavy punch. You're way stronger than they say. Jet, also known as Saryasuke, took a step back and rolled his shoulders before flipping backward twice to create more distance. He rubbed his forearm with a small wince. Dressed in a deep purple shirt and a tall, wide-brimmed hat that sat nearly a foot high, Jet had the appearance of a rogue adventurer. His loose breeches allowed for agile movements, and his long, sturdy boots were built for running. He was a core member of Levy's Shadow Gear team, known for his incredible speed. Since their last mission, Jet and his teammates had been taking it easy at the guild, spending their days joking around and enjoying the lively atmosphere. Perhaps Jet had been intrigued by the ongoing buzz that Rhodes was challenging everyone in the guild, or maybe he felt a twinge of jealousy that Levy had been spending so much time with Rhodes, helping him study foreign languages. Whatever the reason, Jet had personally requested a fight with Rhodes, and his teammate Roy had followed suit. Now, after several minutes of intense back-and-forth combat, Rhodes realized something. Jet was the first opponent he'd faced so far who truly matched him in pure combat ability. Was it that he had grown stronger, or had his opponents simply been holding back more than he realized? Either way, today was different. He wasn't just taking hits, he was keeping up. "You're really strong too," Rhodes admitted. "Your speed is insane. Though your strength could use a little work." Of course, he wasn't going to say that part out loud. He had learned by now not to let pride get to his head. From the sidelines, Roy cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Jet. If you can't win, just back out and let me take over. Levy already said she thinks I'd win." Jet snapped his head toward Roy, yelling, "Shut up, Roy. Levy obviously supports me more." Levy sighed, shaking her head with a wry smile. "I never said that." She glanced back toward Rhodes, watching the fight with interest. His improvement was undeniable. Still, Rhodes has gotten stronger so fast. He's already holding his own against Jet. She murmured. After yelling at his best friend, Jet pressed down the brim of his hat, flashed a confident grin at Rhodes, and took a starting stance. "All right, now it's time to show you my magic. I'm the fastest man in the guild. That's why they call me Jet. Godspeed." In an instant, Jet shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. Rhodes barely registered the moment he took off before a gust of wind whooshed past his ears. Jet had already zipped by him. Instead of attacking immediately, Jet dashed in rapid circles around Rhodes, his movements stirring up wind currents and a rhythmic echo of footsteps. The constant blur of motion made it nearly impossible for Rhodes to track his movements. From what Rhodes could gauge, Jet's raw sprinting speed was roughly on par with his scuttle crab. However, unlike the crab, which could charge in bursts and come to a sudden stop, Jet had the advantage of maneuverability, easily weaving in tight circles without losing momentum. Watching him move, Rhodes couldn't help but recall Rock Lee circling Gar in that one iconic battle. For a split second, he even considered the idea of sticking his leg out to trip Jet. But before he could act, Jet suddenly reappeared at his starting point, stretching his legs and rolling his shoulders. "All right, warm-up's done." Jet cracked his neck. "I remember you have that fast-running crab, right? Why don't you summon it?" Rhodes shook his head. "Nope. Today, the scuttle crab won't be making an appearance." He gripped the pendant hanging from his neck, feeling the magic inside him surge. "I am the bridge between two worlds. You, creature of Summoner's Rift, heed my call and step through the gate." Ancient Grug. Krug? Roy, who had been gearing up to throw another round of encouragement at Jet, visibly shuddered. "Wait. You're not summoning a whole swarm of bugs, are you? That would be terrifying." If it really was a horde of insects, Roy was seriously considering hiding behind Levy. As the pendant in Rhodes' hand glowed with a deep blue light, the ground beneath him trembled slightly. A moment later, two massive stone creatures burst out from the earth, their rough, moss-covered bodies standing like living boulders before him. The larger of the two creatures towered over 2 meters tall, its 4 thick legs resembling sturdy stone pillars. A massive claw-like mouth jutted out from its front, while deep cracks ran along its back like fractured rock. The smaller one was nearly identical in structure, though only about 1.5 meters in height. At first glance, the two ancient Krugs looked just like ordinary boulders, standing still and motionless. But as they stirred, the cracks on their backs pulsed with an eerie blue glow. Ka-ka-ka. Their massive, jagged jaws opened and closed with a low, grinding sound. Waiting for their summoner's command. Rhodes quickly checked his mana reserves. Same as yesterday when he first attempted this. Summoning both Krugs had consumed about as much magic as 3 scuttle crabs. However, his control over his magic had improved since then. This time, he'd managed to reduce the cost slightly. Only a little more than summoning a Poro. It wasn't much, but every bit counted. "That's a beetle?" Roy, who had initially been worried about bugs, now found himself facing a completely different kind of fear. "They look strong." Jet whistled, feeling the weight of pressure as he faced the 2 hulking stone monsters. Their hardened rock-like shells screamed durability, and Jet wasn't exactly known for his destructive power. "In that case," Jet grinned, "I'll just bypass them and go straight for you." With a burst of speed, Jet launched forward. Rhodes didn't hesitate. He ducked low and pivoted, slipping behind the hind legs of the larger Krug. Secret technique, hiding behind the legs. With its massive stone legs and reinforced underbelly, the ancient Krug provided a perfect natural barrier. It was slightly shorter than Rhodes expected, but in this case, that worked in his favor. If Jet wanted to reach him, he'd have to crouch or slow down, which would drastically hinder his speed. Sure enough, as Jet circled around the Krug, he came to a sharp stop. "Oi! That's sturdy!" he shouted, his frustration evident. Rhodes smirked. "Defensive summons are meant to be used like this. It's no different than Rizza keeping her armor on when she fights me." Jet wanted to argue. After all, would Rizza taking off her armor really make any difference? Probably not. But he couldn't exactly tell Rhodes not to defend himself. That wouldn't be fair. "Fine then." Jet cracked his knuckles and lowered his stance. "Let's see how you handle this." Falcon skydive. Jet's figure soared through the air, tracing a beautiful arc over the guild's training yard. As he reached the peak of his jump, he swung his leg down hard, aiming a powerful kick at the ancient Krug's thick, stone-like leg. Rhodes felt the impact reverberate through the creature, the pillar he was leaning on trembling slightly beneath the force. The ancient Krug's head tilted upward, its cracked stone hide shifting slightly, as if it had actually felt pain. "Krug, counterattack." At Rhodes' command, the smaller Krug beside him lurched forward, swinging its heavy rocky body toward Jet. "It's tough, but I can still damage it," Jet assessed, dodging the oncoming slam before pulling back to gain some distance. Then, without hesitation, he exploded forward again, calling out his next move, super high-speed impact. "Isn't that just an iron shoulder charge?" Rhodes thought as he quickly took note of Jet's momentum-heavy stance. And immediately ducked out of the way. Bang! Jet's shoulder collided with the hind legs of the ancient Krug, sending a shockwave of force through its massive body. The towering stone creature staggered backward, nearly toppling over. But before the Krug could counterattack, Jet had already sprinted away, shaking his arms. "This is bad. Even after all that, I still can't take it down?" Rhodes peered out from behind his massive stone defender, grinning. "If you stop moving, I'm going to launch my attack." Jet flashed a confident smile, his body already shifting into a readied stance. "Please, that slow thing could never keep up with my speed. To deal with high-speed opponents, you need to be a little smarter." Rhodes gripped his pendant tightly, channeling his magic while reciting a short incantation. A blue summoning circle pulsed beneath his feet. In a flash of light, another summon emerged. The scuttle crab had arrived. "Wait, he can summon multiple creatures at the same time?" Levy, who had been observing the fight from the sidelines, gasped in astonishment. She had some knowledge of celestial spirit magic, and she knew that opening two gates at once was something only the most advanced celestial wizards could achieve. Rhodes' summoning magic seemed to operate under a similar principle, and yet he was now maintaining 3 summons at once, 2 ancient Krugs and the scuttle crab. And if they counted Worm, who was happily watching the battle unfold from nearby, that made 4 entities under his control at the same time. This isn't just impressive. This is unheard of. Chapter 34, Victory. "So, you're using those stone monsters for defense and this weird crab to chase me down?" Jet didn't dwell too much on the details. His confidence was unwavering. "If you think you can catch me, then go ahead and try. It's not that simple." Rhodes smirked, placing a hand on the ancient Krug's thick stone leg. Krug, split. Crack. At Rhodes' command, the glowing blue fissure on the ancient Krug's back flashed brilliantly. A deep rumbling followed as its body suddenly split apart, the 2 halves shifting and reshaping as they hit the ground. In an instant, 2 smaller Krugs stood where the ancient Krug once was. Wait, it can split on its own? This was different from the game. In the Summoner's Rift, Krugs only split when defeated. But here, Rhodes could command it to split at will. Now, 3 nearly identical Krugs lined up in front of Rhodes, standing like unshakable sentinels, while the scuttle crab positioned itself ahead of them, its beady eyes locked onto Jet. Jet hesitated for a brief moment, blinking at the sudden shift in numbers. Did you just turn this into a 5-on-1? From his vantage point, he could barely even see Rhodes. Just a wall of stone creatures standing in his way. Still, his confidence didn't waver. Doesn't matter how many there are. Speed doesn't change. My speed will never lose. Don't worry. Rhodes replied coolly. I can't maintain this for too long. He jumped onto one of the Krug's backs, feeling the strain of magic pulsing through his body. His mana was draining quickly. But it wasn't unbearable. 5 minutes. If I don't catch you within 5 minutes, I'll lose. Rhodes pointed forward. Scuttle crab. Charge. With a flicker of motion, the scuttle crab surged forward, blurring into an afterimage. Then, Rhodes took a deep breath. Krugs. Burra. All 3 Krugs reared back, lifted their heavy front claws, and sank into the earth simultaneously. Rhodes included. In an instant, they vanished underground, leaving nothing but disturbed soil in their wake. Jet, dodging the scuttle crab's charge, turned back in high spirits. Only to find that Rhodes had disappeared. Huh? Before Jet could process it, the ground trembled slightly. The soil shifted beneath him, and his instincts screamed at him to move. He leaped high into the air. Just in time. A crug burst out of the ground beneath him, missing him by inches. But as Jet twisted his body midair, a second crug erupted right beneath him. Jet gritted his teeth, flipping midair, kicking his legs out for balance. Falcon dived. Oh, crap. His eyes widened, because just as he dodged the second crug, a third one shot out, carrying Road on its neck. The crug's massive stone jaws clamped down, securing Jet's waist and one arm in an unyielding grip. Got you. Road raised his fist, stopping just an inch from Jet's nose. After a brief pause, he grinned. Well? What do you think? Jet struggled, twisting slightly. The grip was too tight, and his speed was useless in a situation like this. With a sigh of frustration, he relented. TCH. I lost. The crug's grip loosened, and the moment Jet was freed, all of Road's summoned creatures shimmered, then faded away. Road landed lightly on the ground, feeling a wave of exhaustion but also a thrill of victory. He was ecstatic. But, in order to not rub salt in Jet's wounds, he suppressed the giant grin threatening to spread across his face, and instead settled for a casual, composed smile. Thanks for sparring with me. Rhodes extended his hand in gratitude. We're guildmates. Helping each other out is what we do. Jet also raised his hand. But instead of shaking, he snapped Rhodes' palm open with a playful grin before clenching his fist, holding it out with the back of his hand facing Rhodes. Handshakes are way too formal. Not my style. Rhodes smirked, raising his fist to bump Jet's. They laughed together. He really was starting to love this guild. Oh. With a dramatic puff of dust, Max leapt into the spotlight, microphone in hand, his voice booming with excitement, and the winner is Rhodes. The crowd erupted in cheers. After a streak of losses, today marks Rhodes' very first victory since joining Fairy Tail. Loud applause followed. Many had watched his fights. From his crushing defeat against Rosetta now. Even though only half a month had passed, they had witnessed him grow stronger with every battle, refusing to give up no matter how many times he lost. Now, finally, he had won. And it felt just as rewarding for them as it did for him. It was like watching a little brother finally come into his own. And the guild couldn't be prouder. Myra stood among the crowd, quietly smiling. She didn't need to cheer loudly like the others. Instead, she simply raised her fist in support, standing out in a sea of people in her flowing red dress. Well done, Rhodes. A familiar voice rang out. I'll buy you a drink later. Rhodes turned just in time to see Kanna, a bottle in one hand and a wad of cash in the other, grinning at him. And tomorrow? No need to go looking for an opponent. I'm fighting you myself. Her voice carried over the noise, brimming with excitement. Rhodes blinked. Wait. Had she bet on him? He scanned the crowd. Judging by the groans of disappointment from some of the guild members, almost everyone had bet on Jet. Except for Myra, who had encouraged him from the start. Kanna, however. She had bet on him. And from the smug look on her face, she had made a killing. Her pockets were full, and now, she didn't have to worry about running out of booze for a long time. Despite the victory, Rhodes couldn't help but feel awkward. Even though he knew Kanna was talking about sparring with him, her tipsy expression, revealing outfit, the wad of cash in her hand, and the way she phrased it. Yeah, it was a little hard not to misinterpret. But before Rhodes could overthink it, the celebration turned into chaos. The guild members who had lost their bets, including Mikau and Wakaba, two of the older members, began venting their frustrations. Jet. You threw the fight, didn't you? I lost a fortune. You're saying I lost on purpose? Get over here and say that to my face. Jet snapped back, his pride on the line. As expected, a heated argument turned into a full-blown brawl. Rhodes barely dodged a flying shoe, only to catch an unfortunate poro that had been thrown as a weapon. Okay, that's it. Time to retreat. He clutched Worm, who had spirals for eyes, completely dizzy. Whoa. The poor creature groaned in agreement. Meanwhile, Master McGriv stood at a distance, smiling as he watched the chaos unfold. Rhodes' progress and his growing bonds with the guild were good signs. Plus, for once, they were fighting outside instead of destroying the guild from the inside. Crash. Mikau smashed through a window and landed headfirst into the guild hall. A single vein popped on McGriv's forehead, but he kept smiling. Wakaba, you son of a... Mikau stormed out of the window again, now covered in purple flames. Rhodes blinked. Weren't they just on the same side? The fight only escalated. Wakaba threw a fist made of smoke, Kanna pulled out her magic cards, and Elfman transformed his arm into a beast claw. Rhodes wisely took another step back. Yeah. I should probably summon a Krug to block this madness. Mikau, don't you run. The brawl spilled out of the guild hall, and the already broken window became an even bigger hole. The vein on Makarov's forehead twitched. Then, "I smell a fight." Natsu, just returning from a mission, dropped his bags and charged into the backyard. And with his grand entrance, the last intact window was destroyed. "I'm joining too." "Fire Drago." That was the final straw. Makarov suddenly expanded, his body growing massive, casting a shadow over the entire battlefield. "Enough. Stop destroying the guild." His voice boomed like thunder. With one stomp, Natsu's fire dragon iron fist was cut off before he could even shout it out. With one slap, half the brawlers were planted face first into the ground. Myra, watching from behind the towering guild master, smiled sweetly. "Oh my, looks like things got lively again." She showed no concern whatsoever. Despite her own brother being one of the people buried, Rhodes held on to warm and trembled. Noted. Do not get on the master's bad side. He swallowed nervously, remembering the time he accidentally broke part of the courtyard wall while summoning the swift crab. "Thank you, master, for not slapping me into the ground too. I am eternally grateful." Chapter 35, Fighting and Progress. Myra smiled and reminded him. "Mr. Rhodes, who looks like he wants to prostrate on the spot, it's time for work." Rhodes nodded tiredly. "Yeah, I know, but collapse would have been a better word choice." Myra chuckled. "It seems that along with your magic, your common language skills have also improved. That's thanks to you and Loki always correcting me and Levi and Ritas too." Rhodes paused, suddenly realizing that the very people he just mentioned, except Myra, were currently lying face down in the yard. Are they going to be okay?" "They'll be fine." Myra reassured him casually. "They'll be up and moving soon." She turned and walked toward the guild hall. "Come on, let's start cleaning up inside first." Rhodes followed, stealing a glance back every few steps. Just as Myra had said, the guild members who had been smacked into the ground by Master Makarov began dusting themselves off and standing up. When Loki was about to use magic to repair the wall, Makarov stopped her. "Leave it to Mikau and Wakaba. No magic. They broke it, they fix it." Loki sighed, gathered a pile of wood for them, and then turned to fix only the broken furniture inside the guild. Master Makarov's anger only lasted for a moment. Just a few minutes later, when Mikau and Wakaba started bickering again while fixing the wall, the guild master simply ignored them. Everyone went back to their usual routines. Except for Natsu, who, upon hearing about Rhodes' previous battle, immediately challenged him to a rematch. Rhodes happily agreed. He was eager to see how much he had improved. After a busy morning, it was finally lunchtime. Rhodes' favorite part of the day. However, today's meal was clearly something special. Myra and Loki had each brought out 2 massive platters alongside Rhodes' usual vegetarian dishes. On the table, a dazzling seafood feast awaited them, marinated prawns, neatly arranged in a circle around the plate, their heads facing inward, bodies fanned outward in a perfect spiral. Marinated crab roe. Unlike steamed crab, the marinade had solidified the roe into a rich, deep red color. The crab meat and roe sat nestled inside an open shell, making for a visually stunning presentation. Seafood omelette. A large, golden omelette spread across an entire plate. Along the edge, a ring of tender clam meat had been arranged with other shellfish piled in the center. Beneath it all, vibrant green chives peeked through like the petals of a blooming sunflower. Crab and shrimp casserole porridge. As soon as the lid was lifted, a wave of rich, mouth-watering aroma filled the air, instantly stimulating everyone's appetite. Warm perched at the edge of the table, his eyes practically glowing with anticipation. He was a well-mannered Poro and wouldn't touch the food without permission. But that didn't stop him from sticking his tongue out and drooling pitifully. Rhodes gulped. "Wait. Is today's theme seafood? Why is it so extravagant?" Loki grinned. "Because Myra wanted to celebrate for you. She asked Cook to make his specialty dishes." "Wait, what?" Rhodes was so overwhelmed by the feast before him that his brain nearly shut down. This is too much." But his stomach betrayed him, growling audibly. Loki and Myra both giggled. As if that wasn't enough, Myra returned carrying 3 glasses of vibrant blue liquid. "Here, 3 glasses of blue starry sky." She set them down and smiled. "Kanna's treat." Rhodes and Loki turned toward the next table. There sat Kanna, balancing a beer barrel on her lap, smirking as she raised her own drink toward them. The 3 of them raised their glasses in return, clinked them together, and took a sip. Rhodes smacked his lips thoughtfully. Sweet. He wasn't exactly a wine connoisseur, but the drink reminded him of a smoother, richer Rio, with a much stronger kick. Myra chuckled. "This wine comes from one of our neighboring countries. Because of tariffs and transportation, it's a bit expensive, but the taste makes it worth it. The only downside is that the alcohol content is too low." Doesn't really suit my taste. Kana sighed, swirling the drink in her hand. But as long as you guys enjoy it, that's all that matters. It's delicious. Thank you. Rhodes responded with genuine appreciation, setting his glass down before turning his attention to the feast in front of him. He started with the marinated prawns. The texture was delightfully soft and almost sticky, a stark contrast to steamed shrimp. The natural sweetness of the shrimp was enhanced by the marinade, making every bite burst with fresh, clean flavors. Without even a hint of fishiness. Each dish had its own unique charm, a testament to the chef's passion for his craft. Rhodes took his time savoring every bite, appreciating the rich flavors and textures. This is incredible. He praised, his admiration evident in every word. Myra chuckled. I think Mr. Cook would like you very much. Many people in the guild loved to eat, but Rhodes was the only one who truly appreciated the food with both his words and his taste buds. Haha. Rhodes scratched his head sheepishly. Actually, Mr. Cook looks so serious that I don't even dare to talk when he's around. Myra smiled nostalgically. That's because Mr. Cook takes anything related to food very seriously. And, well. She paused for a moment before continuing, her voice laced with amusement and fondness for the memory. When Happy was still little, he once dragged Natsu into the kitchen to steal some fish. They ended up knocking over an entire rack of seasoning jars, ruining a huge batch of ingredients. As a result, Mr. Cook chased them for 3 blocks with a cleaver and beat Natsu senseless. Rhodes blinked. So that's why Natsu never goes near the kitchen anymore. Myra nodded knowingly. Ever since that day, both Natsu and Happy have completely avoided the kitchen, and Mr. Cook developed the habit of staring down anyone who enters. Rhodes nodded solemnly, taking mental notes. Understood. I'll be extra careful when I go to the kitchen. Actually, if I don't have to, I'll just communicate through the serving window. Lockie glanced at Myra, feeling a small sense of relief. Myra rarely brought up old memories on her own. Perhaps she was finally starting to come to terms with everything that had happened. After all, Natsu wasn't the only one who had been there that day. Rhodes ended up sparring with Natsu again that afternoon. Originally, he was supposed to fight Kana, but after drinking far too much, she couldn't even stand. She was curled up around a barrel, muttering incoherent nonsense in her sleep. Natsu's destructive power was on a whole different level compared to Jet's. One fire dragon's iron fist was enough to shatter a stone beetle's leg. One fire dragon's roar could send the ancient stone beetle flying, forcing it to split into smaller forms on impact. If there was one advantage, it was that Rhodes' summons were nimble underground. Whenever his stone beetles burrowed beneath the battlefield, they could break through the surface and attack from multiple angles, forcing Natsu to stay on his toes. But unlike Jet, who had been trapped by the beetle's grip, Natsu simply ignited his entire body in flames, using the intense heat and explosive power to break free and blast his way through the summons. With such a drastic contrast, Rhodes was left scratching his head. Wait. Is this beetle strong or weak? After all, Natsu's flames should count as a high-level attack, right? Still, Rhodes achieved his best results yet. By strategically outnumbering Natsu, he actually managed to throw him off balance, nearly making him fall. It was the perfect chance to press the attack until Natsu reacted at the last second, bracing against the ground and flipping mid-air, catching himself with a perfect fire dragon's claw counter. In close combat, however, Rhodes was no longer completely powerless. He held his own against Natsu for several rounds, trading blows and dodging flames before inevitably ending up face down in the dirt again. Still, for a moment, it had been a real fight. This hard-fought battle was so touching that Elfman, watching from the sidelines, was moved to tears. Clenching his fists, his voice trembled as he declared, This is what it means to be a man. And he almost jumped in to join the fight. Chapter 36, Is Kana really this strong? Ha. Hey. Ha. Rhodes threw punch after punch into the sandbag before him, his bare upper body glistening with sweat under the dim light. This was his latest training routine. A few days ago, he had spent a huge sum to buy this sandbag, believing that if he invested money into his training, he'd feel too guilty to slack off. After all, wasting money hurt. After half an hour of intense punching, Rhodes finally stopped, panting heavily. He wiped the sweat from his face before gently massaging his sore arms. Once his breathing steadied, he made his way to the shower. Before stepping out of the bathroom, Rhodes paused in front of the mirror, flexing his arm with a smirk. Looks like I'm getting stronger. He bent down and patted his calf, remembering how, not long ago, doing this would cause his legs to jiggle. Now, however, solid muscle. Snore. Warm, lounging nearby, gave an enthusiastic snore of approval. Glad to hear it. Now, time to study. Rhodes returned to his bedroom, sat at his writing desk, and opened his magazine and notebook. Over the past few days, he had used enchanted glasses to speed read through more than 60 issues, and now he had sorted them into 2 stacks. One pile, containing about 20 magazines, held important information, including news on major guilds, famous wizards, notable cities, and even trouble-causing magic. The other stack, roughly 30 magazines, held less significant information. Rhodes focused on the first pile, carefully recording key details in his notebook. The goal? To understand this world as thoroughly as possible, avoid unnecessary trouble, and prepare for unexpected situations. Some magics, he noted, were instant kill spells. Those that, if unfamiliar, could easily fool their targets. But if one understood their mechanics, they could be countered effortlessly. For example, charm magic, which had been banned by the Magic Council years ago. After reading about its effects, Rhodes couldn't help but mutter, "Honestly, I kind of want to learn it." Flipping through the pages, he came across an article about a rogue wizard, Bora of the Prominence. Expelled from the Titan Nose Guild for theft. Recently spotted near the border between Fiore and Bosco, committing various crimes. Rhodes jotted the name down in his notebook. This wasn't just random news, he needed to be aware of dangerous individuals, in case he ever encountered them. Finally, he closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and moved into meditation. The guild master's words echoed in his mind: if you want to become stronger, you must build a strong foundation. Even the most powerful magic needs the magic power to sustain it. And Myra, in a rare serious tone, had warned him, don't get too greedy. If you push too hard, you'll end up not only hurting yourself, but also your companions. Rhodes was someone who valued advice, especially when it came to things he didn't fully understand. So, instead of rushing things, he focused on steadily accumulating magic power and building his physical strength every day. At the same time, he continued to explore the Summoner's Rift shrouded in black fog using his mental energy. If the beasts he summoned ever lost control, it was fine as long as it happened in the wilderness. But if they rampaged inside a city, Rhodes had no doubt he'd end up thrown in prison. July 22nd, sunny today's opponent, Kana. And Rhodes felt good about this one. As expected, Kana had already downed an entire barrel of liquor early in the morning. Sitting beside her was Mikau, one of her usual drinking buddies. "Kana, aren't you getting a little too drunk these days?" Mikau asked, raising an eyebrow. Gulp, gulp, gulp ha. Kana wiped her mouth, side-eyeing Mikau. "Who cares? You're drinking too." Mikau shrugged. "Not that I care, but I just think it's better for women to drink a little less." "Ugh, you're so annoying. I won money yesterday. Of course I'm gonna drink all I want today." Kana rolled her eyes and lifted the barrel again, though she drank a little slower this time. "Young people these days." Mikau sighed, speaking in his usual old man tone. After a few more swigs, Kana finally put the barrel down with a loud thud. "Rhodes, you ready?" "Almost." As an excellent worker, Rhodes had to finish his tasks first. "Also, stop drinking. Relax. It's still early." Kana was very aware of her own alcohol tolerance. A single barrel in the morning? That was just a warm-up. Myra once did a rough estimate and figured out that Kana alone accounted for over 20% of the guild's total alcohol consumption. That is to say, a considerable part of the salary that Rhodes earns now can be considered as Kana's contribution. After finishing his chores, Rhodes and Kana headed to the backyard to prepare for their match. Naturally, a few people came to watch, but not as many as usual. Rhodes started as he always did, by summoning the scuttle crab for a test run. Just to be sure. "Let's confirm one thing." Kana pulled out 3 glowing cards from the pouch on her waist. "If I hit this guy, will it die?" Rhodes shook his head reassuringly. "Don't worry, once it takes enough damage, it gets sent back. It'll be fully recovered by tomorrow." Besides, compared to Poro, both the scuttle crab and Krug seemed far less intelligent in personality. "Good. Then I won't hold back." Kana smirked. The cards in her hand gleamed with golden light. At that moment, Rhodes felt something shift. Even though she'd just been drinking like a hopeless drunk, when Kana got serious, her entire presence changed. For a brief moment, Rhodes felt like he was facing Mirza. The scuttle crab charged forward at full speed, but Kana flicked her wrist, sending out 3 enchanted cards with pinpoint accuracy. They struck the crab's head, and with a flash of golden light, the summon was instantly repelled. Rhodes' eyes widened in surprise. That power. Without hesitation, he immediately summoned the Krug. Kana responded by hurling 2 more cards. One burst into flames, while the other whipped up a powerful gust of wind. The attacks slammed into the Krug, causing its body to split into 2 smaller Krugs on impact. But she wasn't done yet. With another swift flick of her wrist, 2 more cards shot forward. This time, golden lightning crackled across the battlefield, striking all of them. Rhodes could only watch in awe as brilliant magical effects exploded all around him. Light, fire, wind, thunder? He murmured. He finally understood, Kana was a true all-rounder. As the Krugs shattered into even smaller mini-Krugs, Kana calmly pulled out 6 more cards and let them fly. Boom. A series of explosions echoed through the yard as the remaining Krugs were completely wiped out. Kana cracked her wrists, flashing a confident grin. Alright, that should wrap up the magic battle. Time for the real fight. Close combat, right? Rhodes exhaled sharply. He still had one more scuttle crab left, but there was no point in summoning it now. Yeah. He nodded. Let's do this. Next time, I need to summon the Krugs underground before the fight starts. A few minutes later, Rhodes lay flat on his back, staring up at the sky, questioning his life choices. This speed. This strength, how is Kana so strong? Of course, Kana is strong. She explained. She's been an S-class candidate for 3 years in a row. Rhodes blinked. Wait. What? Myra nodded. She keeps reaching the final round of the S-class exams, but she always has bad luck with her opponents. Like who? Oh, you know Urza or Miss Togan. Rhodes immediately felt better. Oh. Yeah. That makes sense. He thought back to Urza's overwhelming presence and Miss Togan's absurdly powerful sleep magic. No wonder Kana hadn't passed. But losing to someone like her was nothing to be ashamed of. Still, as he glanced over at Kana, who had switched to sipping from a much smaller cup of wine, Rhodes couldn't help but wonder. For someone who acted so carefree, she must have carried a lot of burdens in her heart. Chapter 37, Why Are You Protecting Me? Kana's fighting style was very different from Natsu's or the other brawlers in Fairy Tail. She relied more on grappling and wrestling techniques, overpowering her opponents with sheer brute force rather than flashy, destructive magic. Rhodes had a sneaking suspicion that her ridiculous strength came from lifting barrels every single day. That wasn't the only thing that scared him, though. During their spar, he noticed something alarming. Twice, Kana's fingers twitched toward his eyes, and once, her knee almost shot up toward his crotch. Luckily, she held back each time. But Rhodes still broke out in a cold sweat. I have to find a way to defend against dirty moves in the future. Boys need to protect themselves in the wild. After reviewing the battle in his head, he silently raised Kana's danger level. Kana shook her empty barrel with a lazy grin. Rhodes. A glass of beer. Rhodes nodded. Got it. He walked over to grab a barrel but paused mid-step. Wait. Did you say a glass or a barrel just now? One glass. Geez, why are you so nitpicky? Kana waved him off and threw a glance toward Mikau and Wakaba, who were loudly debating parenting techniques at the bar. Rhodes poured her a drink, but as he handed it over, he noticed something odd. Kana, the infamous drinker of Fairy Tail, was sipping her beer. Not chugging. Sipping. Like she was just trying to satisfy a small craving. Rhodes squinted. Something's off about you. Kana raised an eyebrow. What, you wanna fight again? We can keep going if you want. Rhodes replied casually. I just think you're acting weird. That was when Myra suddenly leaned in, eyes twinkling with curiosity. Could it be? She gasped. Kana has a boyfriend? Kana snorted. Yeah, right. She lifted her glass. The only love of my life is alcohol. Myra ignored her denial completely. So that means there's someone you like, but you don't have the courage to confess. Myra grinned mischievously and tapped her chin in thought. Now, who has Kana been hanging around lately? Then, with a dramatic flourish, Myra pointed straight at Rhodes. It's you. Rhodes nearly spat out his drink. What? Myra nodded sagely. Yes, it all makes sense. Kana was mesmerized by Rhodes' unbreakable will. His tenacity. And during today's battle, she was captivated by his masculinity. Kana sighed in relief. Thank God. Myra was still pulling theories out of thin air like she always did. Last month, she said Wakaba had a crush on Lucky. Nonsense. Wakaba liked every beautiful and gentle woman equally. Any mature Fairy Tail member knew that Myra's gossip was 90% fiction. The best response? Ignore first, then question. Unfortunately, Rhodes wasn't that mature yet. He immediately denied it. Look, I appreciate the compliment, Myra, but let's be real. Kana knocked me flat on my back in a single shoulder throw. He turned to look at Kana, still seated at the bar, legs crossed. Only to barely dodge a flying sandal aimed at his head. If it's not Rhodes, then who else could it be? Myra tapped her chin thoughtfully. Was it Loke? Kana rolled her eyes. As if. That guy wouldn't dare. Myra pouted. Then why are you acting weird today? Kana stood up abruptly, grabbed her glass, and strode toward another table. She paused halfway, hesitated for a second, then slowed her pace and quietly sat down next to Mikau and Wakaba, her two drinking buddies. Myra narrowed her eyes. Could it be Mikau? She whispered. Rhodes nearly choked on air. Myra, what kind of ridiculous plot twist is that? Mikau is nearly 20 years older than her. Myra shrugged playfully. You never know. Finally, she dropped the subject, stretching with a satisfied smile. Anyway, Rhodes, let's go shopping this afternoon. All right. Rhodes didn't hesitate to agree, though he was a little puzzled. Isn't Mr. Cook the one who usually handles the shopping? I thought he preferred picking out ingredients himself. He does. Myra replied with a small smile. But today, he's taking his grandson out for a fishing trip, so we have to take care of it instead. Rhodes nodded in understanding. It was rare to see Mr. Cook, who took cooking very seriously, make exceptions. But when it came to his grandson, he was apparently a very doting grandfather. Got it. Just hand me the bag, and I'll carry it. Rhodes had already assigned himself a clear role. When it came to something as complicated as choosing ingredients, he was absolutely not the guy for the job. That was Myra's responsibility. As soon as they left the guild and walked through the town's residential area, Rhodes immediately noticed just how popular Myra was. Miss Myra, heading out? Yes, just picking up a few things. Miss Myra, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Miss Myra, will you be in the next issue of Sorcerer Weekly? Sorry, I haven't taken on any magazine shoots recently. Everywhere they went, people recognized her. Some simply greeted her with a smile, while others took the chance to ask her questions. Rhodes, walking beside her, couldn't help but comment. You really are popular. Myra let out a soft chuckle. Everyone is just a little too enthusiastic sometimes, she admitted. It can be a bit overwhelming. Rhodes grinned. Oh yes, the great Miss Mara Jane Strauss. The fairy tale starlet. Maybe next time, you should wear sunglasses and a mask too. You know, blend in better. Myra giggled, playfully clapping her hands. That's a great idea. But if I really wanted to stand out, I could just transform into you. Just change my head and all. Rhodes visibly paled. I beg you, have mercy. I do not want to be known as Fairy Tale's cross-dressing wizard in Sorcerer Weekly. Myra laughed, clearly enjoying his reaction. At this point, Rhodes noticed something else. Myra wasn't correcting his speech anymore. He had improved. Myra continued walking, a knowing smile on her lips, as she and Rhodes crossed a stone-arched bridge over the river. Then, she pointed ahead. The next intersection leads to the shopping district. Have you been here before? Rhodes shook his head. No, my usual range of activities is on the other side of the river. I just buy things from the shops near the guild. Myra tilted her head slightly in surprise. Huh? You've been here for almost a month, and you haven't explored the city? She glanced at him curiously. What do you do after work? Rhodes thought for a moment before replying. Physical training, magic practice, meditation, reading. Mostly magazines. Thinking about it, he realized that everything he had been doing lately revolved around survival and self-improvement. The only thing that could be called leisure was listening to music on the phonograph while doing laundry. Even reading magazines was for understanding the world and gathering information rather than pure enjoyment. Myra gave him a thoughtful look. Doesn't that feel exhausting? Rhodes shook his head. Not really. Learning magic is interesting on its own. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Besides, working hard is the only way I can feel at ease and eventually pay off that massive debt. Myra chuckled knowingly. Ah, debts really are a pain. Then she grinned. But don't stress too much about it. The master doesn't really need the money. Rhodes sighed again, a little helplessly. That's exactly why I want to pay him back as soon as possible. He's already done too much for me. Myra simply smiled but said nothing. She understood. The guild master treated all of Fairy Tale's members like family, and Rhodes was no exception. But Rhodes himself didn't seem to fully realize that yet. Move it. Get out of the way. As they entered the busy shopping street, a commotion broke out. A man came rushing toward them, shoving people aside as he sprinted forward. Out of my way. Don't try to stop me. In one hand, he clutched a stolen handbag, while in the other, a short knife flashed under the sunlight, warning the bystanders not to interfere. Behind him, a panicked voice cried out, "Stop him! He stole my bag! Catch him!" People hesitated, backing away cautiously. As the thief closed in on them, Myra's delicate eyebrows furrowed slightly. With a graceful motion, she raised one arm protectively, shielding Rhodes behind her. Rhodes blinked in confusion. Sister, didn't you say you're not good at fighting? So why are you protecting me now? Chapter 38. Rhodes wasn't about to let Myra handle danger alone. He gently pressed her arm aside and guided her toward the side of the road. Myra blinked in surprise at his decisive action but obediently stepped back without protest. Rhodes stood alone in the middle of the road as the bag snatcher charged straight at him. With a swift motion, he raised his leg and kicked the man's wrist. The short knife flew into the air. Damn! The thief barely had time to curse before Rhodes grabbed his wrist, shifted his weight, and executed a shoulder throw. A move straight from Ken's book. Boom! The bag snatcher slammed onto the bluestone pavement with a heavy thud. The stolen handbag flew from his grip, skidding across the ground. Without even looking, Rhodes extended his right hand calmly, catching the falling knife by its handle. Flawless execution. Rhodes was very satisfied with how cool he looked. But then, he realized there was a small problem. Originally, he had planned to squat down, press the knife next to the thief's ear, and intimidate him a little. Just to be dramatic. But he had overlooked a couple of things. First, the commercial district's road was paved with bluestone, not the softer dirt floor of the guild's backyard. Second, this wasn't a fairy tale wizard. Just a regular, non-magical thief. Rhodes had gotten too used to fighting his guildmates, so he hadn't held back. As a result, the bag snatcher let out a pained cough, spat out blood, rolled his eyes, and promptly passed out. He was completely unconscious. Rhodes scratched his head. Did I hit him too hard? I really didn't mean to. Feeling a little guilty, he knelt beside the man to check his condition. He was still breathing, but his arm was probably broken. Myra, however, was unbothered. It's fine, she said casually. Armed robbery is a serious crime. The sheriff will take care of it. She picked up the stolen handbag and smiled. We'll just wait for the owner. Nearby pedestrians had already run off to get the sheriff, and the voice of the woman who had been robbed grew closer. Isn't that Miss Myra? She's a fairy tale wizard. More and more onlookers recognized Myra, and soon their attention turned to the guild emblem barely visible beneath Rhodes' short-sleeved shirt. A few people went to check on the unconscious thief. Instead of sympathy, they just shook their heads. One of them clicked their tongue. TSK, lucky guy. Rhodes blinked. Huh? Another bystander sighed dramatically. Getting beaten up by a fairy tale wizard and only breaking an arm? He got off easy. Back in the day, the collateral damage from one of their fights destroyed half a street. Rhodes was speechless. Wait. Did I just embarrass the guild? He asked Myra hesitantly. Myra giggled. Not at all. In fact, you looked quite handsome just now. Fairy Tale's reputation remained the same as always. They're good people. They just have no concept of restraint. Finally, the owner of the handbag arrived. A plump woman with a slightly old-fashioned perm and a flushed face from running. Myra handed over the bag with a smile. Please check if anything is missing. The woman clutched it tightly. Thank you so much. There's something important in here. She trailed off, her eyes widening as she took a closer look at Myra's face. Then, her gaze shifted to Rhodes' emblem. Her expression brightened in recognition. Oh. What a coincidence. My husband is in your guild too. Rhodes blinked. Wait. Really? The woman raised her hand to her forehead, mimicking a familiar gesture. You know Wakaba, right? The guy with the weird hair and that old pipe. So, you're Mr. Wakaba's wife? My name is Myra Jane, and this is Rhodes. Myra said with a warm smile, speaking to the older woman as if they had known each other for years. I often hear him talk about you and your daughter. Honestly, if it weren't for you, his life would be a complete mess. Really? He actually said that? The woman's face lit up with a mix of happiness and embarrassment. That man. So he knows how much he relies on me, huh? Yes, Mr. Wakaba mentions you quite a lot. Rhodes chimed in with an awkward chuckle. Technically, that wasn't a lie. Wakaba did talk about his wife often, but most of the time, it was while grumbling about being nagged. Rhodes suddenly realized something. Myra was very skilled at conversation. The first part of her sentence, I often hear him talk about you, was completely true. The second part, if it weren't for you, he'd be a mess, was more of an educated guess, but phrased in a way that made it sound like something Wakaba himself had admitted. This subtle wordplay led to a misunderstanding that would likely never be corrected. After all, even if Wakaba's wife confronted him at home, he wasn't stupid enough to deny it outright. The conversation then shifted to some rather personal inquiries, such as whether Wakaba ogled the waitresses at the guild too much or flicked his cigarette ash around carelessly. Myra answered everything with a gentle smile, responding in a way that was somehow both polite and non-committal. Even if she was being strategic, she was careful never to say anything that might actually cause problems for someone else's marriage. Rhodes took mental notes. Lesson learned, the art of talking without really talking. Just as their conversation wrapped up, a sheriff in a brown uniform arrived with his team, looking serious. Wakaba's wife quickly explained the situation, clarifying that Rhodes was the one who bravely stopped the thief. The sheriff checked the unconscious criminal, made sure he wasn't in any life-threatening condition, then ordered his men to carry him away. He also confiscated the short knife as evidence. Just as Myra had said earlier, armed robbery was a major crime in Fiore. Not only was Rhodes not held responsible for the injury, but the sheriff even thanked him for his actions. The situation was handled quickly, and Wakaba's wife bid them farewell. Though not before flashing Myra a cheerful smile. "By the way, take this. Consider it a little thank you gift." Before Rhodes could react, she stuffed 2 small papers into his hands. He blinked and looked down. Not money, but Honey Dessert House grand opening invitation ticket. Before he could say anything, the woman winked at him, gave him an encouraging pat on the arm, and whispered, "Young man, keep working hard." Then, before he could process her words, she walked off with a knowing smile. Myra tilted her head curiously. What did she say? Rhodes hesitated. He wasn't entirely sure what she meant by keep working hard. Instead, he focused on the papers in his hand. She gave us an invitation to a dessert shop. Myra took one and examined it. "Oh, it opens next month." She gave him a playful smile and waved the ticket in the air. "Let's go check it out together when it opens?" "Well, okay." Rhodes gave a small nod. Next month was really just over a week away, and, well, desserts were always nice. Something to look forward to, right? "All right, time to get down to business," Myra said as she tucked away the invitation ticket. She then pulled out a shopping list, which unfolded into a surprisingly long piece of paper. Rhodes leaned in to take a look. After a single glance, he instinctively reached for his pendant. Yeah, the crab was definitely going to be carrying all this back later. The shopping district was different from what Rhodes had imagined. Compared to the skyscrapers and traffic jams from his previous world, this place had a balance between a lively city street and a small town marketplace. The roads were bustling with pedestrians, merchants shouted their deals, and shops ranged from large, well-established businesses to simple makeshift stalls. For a town with only about 60,000 people, this place was surprisingly lively. Myra moved through the market gracefully, selecting only the freshest fruits, vegetables, and cuts of meat. She bargained effortlessly, her pleasant voice adjusting to the different personalities of the shopkeepers. Some laughed and teased her, while others acted tough at first before giving in to her charm. Rhodes followed closely, occasionally holding out a bag for her selections. Most of the time, though, he just watched. One moment, he was observing Myra's careful selection of ingredients. The next, he was taking in the world around him. The discarded leaves near a vegetable stall, the wet, uneven stone pavement in front of a seafood shop, the salty breeze carrying the scent of fish, the stray puppy weaving between shoppers' legs. The sound of laughter, haggling, and footsteps blending into the heartbeat of the town. It was messy, imperfect, and so full of life. And for the first time in a long while, Rhodes felt completely immersed in it. "Rhodes?" Myra's voice pulled him back to reality. She stood in front of him with that warm, familiar smile. The same smile that always felt a little out of reach before. "Let's go. We still need to pick up some wine." Rhodes blinked. His heart skipped a beat. Why does this feel different? Maybe it was the way she looked at him just now. Or maybe it was how natural it felt. Shopping together, walking side by side, sharing casual conversations. For so long, that smile felt distant. Something meant for someone else. But now, it felt closer than ever. "Are you tired?" Myra asked, tilting her head. "No." Rhodes replied quickly, shaking his head. "Let's go." As they continued walking, Rhodes couldn't help but repeat a single word in his mind. "We." It was just a simple word. But somehow, it felt really nice. And just for a second, he entertained a small, unrealistic thought. Chapter 39, Payday. As August arrived, Magnolia seemed to grow even hotter. The town had done a great job with greenery, and shade from trees was easy to find, but that also meant the constant buzzing of cicadas filled the air. On good days, the rhythmic hum felt nostalgic, a reminder of what summer should be like. On bad days, it was just plain annoying. Inside the Fairy Tale Guild Hall, the ceiling fan spun slowly, offering a weak breeze to the bustling tavern below. The heat made even the usual boisterous chatter feel oppressive. Rhodes slumped over a table, drained and sluggish. He wasn't the only one. Many guild members sat around with lazy expressions, sipping ice-cold beer just to get a moment's relief. But one person remained popular despite the heat. Grateful Buster. Though sweat dripped from his forehead, he was still working hard. Transformed into the guild's personal ice maker. Of course, the biggest benefit of his service? No one reminded him to put his shirt back on. Except for Natsu. That guy was completely unaffected by the heat. Even in this scorching weather, he was running around, full of energy, occasionally breaking into weird dances for no reason. Myra walked over, filling an empty cup with ice before pouring in a refreshing drink. She slid it across the counter toward Rhodes and gave him a small smile. "You don't look very energetic." "Thanks." Rhodes took the cup with a bitter expression. "I barely slept last night. It's too hot, and the mosquitoes wouldn't leave me alone." The mosquito repellent left behind by Goodman had just run out. Rhodes mentally reminded himself to buy a new bottle after work. Myra gave him a look of understanding sympathy. "That sounds rough." "Oh. I haven't seen Worm these past few days." "Where is he?" Rhodes sighed dramatically. "Too hot. The little coward's been hiding and howling a biz to escape the heat." He pressed the cool glass to his forehead, letting out a sigh of relief. "To make things worse, I feel like my magic power growth has slowed down recently. I'm not improving as fast as before." Myra chuckled softly. "That's only natural. Your magic power is already at a pretty high level. You won't see as much of a difference as you did in the beginning." Rhodes raised an eyebrow. "You think I'm that good? At the very least, Jet isn't a match for you anymore." She quickly covered her mouth, realizing it might be a bit rude to put it that way. It was true. Back when Rhodes first summoned the Krug, Jet already had a hard time fighting it. But now, not only had Rhodes' magic power grown, but he had also unlocked something new. The 3 Shadow Wolves. A combination of 2 Shadow Wolves and 1 Great Shadow Wolf. The Shadow Wolves were as large as tigers, with muscular builds and saber-like fangs. The Great Shadow Wolf was even larger and had 2 heads. When all 3 wolves leaned forward, baring their fangs, they looked intimidating and powerful. A clear upgrade from the Krug. Through several sparring matches, Rhodes quickly learned their strengths. More agile than the Krugs. Better at tracking, keen sense of smell. Can move in the shadows, making them harder to detect. Even Kana, who effortlessly countered his Krugs, struggled to land her cards on these fast-moving wolves. The magic power cost to summon them. Roughly the same as 3 scuttle crabs. That meant Rhodes could now command both Krugs and Shadow Wolves simultaneously, turning one-on-one fights into group battles, giving him a significant advantage. The problem that came with it was that Rhodes himself became a bigger target. Of course, every strength comes with a weakness. And Rhodes had found his. Now that his summons were stronger, his opponents started targeting him instead. The best way to neutralize his magic was to attack the summoner directly. That left him with 2 main escape strategies. Option 1, ride the scuttle crab and run away at full speed. Option 2, follow the Krug underground and hide until the fight was over. Cowardly? Maybe. But effective? Absolutely. Of course, those escape tactics were only temporary solutions. To truly solve the problem, Rhodes knew he had to become stronger. One approach was constant physical training and combat practice, but that would take years of dedication before seeing real results. Another option was to learn a new type of magic that would enhance his abilities in battle. But everyone seems to specialize in only one type of magic. Rhodes observed. Why doesn't anyone learn multiple types? Wouldn't that make it easier to handle different situations? Myra, ever patient, gave him a knowing smile. Because there's not enough time or energy. She leaned slightly against the counter, tilting her head as she explained, whether it's mastering a new magic or increasing your magic power, both take an enormous amount of effort. If you try to learn multiple types at once, you'll end up spreading yourself too thin. Instead of mastering anything, you'll just be stuck at an average level in everything. Rhodes frowned, considering her words. Imagine adding another magic practice session to your current schedule. Myra continued. Would you even have time? Rhodes mentally reviewed his daily routine, meditation and physical training, non-negotiable. These were the foundation of growth. Summoning magic practice, critical. The faster he could summon, the less vulnerable he'd be in battle. Work at the guild, necessary. Even Nab, the guild's laziest member, picked up part-time jobs every now and then. Reading and research, essential. He still lacked basic knowledge about the world, and he couldn't afford to make dumb mistakes due to ignorance. There was barely any time left in his schedule. Maybe I could cut down on sleep? Myra's expression darkened instantly. Absolutely not. She raised a finger, her voice turning firm and serious. Sleep is essential for Mindell recovery. You already have an intense schedule. If you push yourself further, you'll end up suffering from magic deficiency syndrome. Rhodes had read about it in books. It usually happened when a mage overused their magic without proper rest. At best, it could cause temporary blackouts. At worst, it could lead to sudden death. A terrifying condition for any wizard. Training to become stronger only to end up dead from overworking himself. That would be beyond stupid. Rhodes exhaled slowly and nodded. Not having time to practice now doesn't mean you won't have time in the future. That was the key realization Rhodes needed to grasp. He couldn't rush things. Priorities existed for a reason. If he focused on his current objectives, expanding his common knowledge and shortening his summoning chance, then, once those goals were achieved, he would naturally have time to explore other magic. After all, he had only been learning for less than a month. There was no point in trying to sprint before he could walk. Myra, sensing his thoughts, suddenly brightened up and tapped the counter. "Don't look so down. I've got good news for you." She set down a neat stack of bills with a light ding, 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 ding. "It's payday. Already?" Rhodes blinked in surprise. He picked up the stack and quickly counted. 120,000 jewel, exactly. That was fast. But wait, I haven't worked for a full month, have I? Myra tilted her head thoughtfully. The day we went shopping for supplies counted as overtime. Rhodes paused. Then nodded. Then, thank you. It was a small moment, but he understood. This wasn't some random summer job like the one he had done before. This was fairy tale. They took care of their own. He glanced at Myra, silently appreciating her thoughtfulness. Myra waved toward Lockie, who was chatting nearby. "Lockie, come grab your share." "Coming." Lockie jogged over and grabbed her own, much thicker stack of bills. She was a full-time member, after all. She sighed dramatically, pressing the money against her cheek. "Finally. My hard work has paid off. I can feel the exact measure of my time and labor value." Rhodes froze. That was a weird way to phrase it. After all the effort he was putting into learning proper language, there was no way he was adding phrases like labor value to his vocabulary. Nope. Deleted from memory. Lockie then hummed happily, rubbing the bills with an affectionate sigh. "Now I can finally get a few more cuties." Rhodes blinked. Cuties. Chapter 40. Rhodes barely had time to enjoy his freshly received salary before 2/3 of it vanished into thin air. Straight into rent payments. What was left? A grand total of 40,000 J. He sighed. At least I don't have to worry about a place to sleep. For now. His mind quickly drifted to the financial hole he was in. The 150,000 J loan from Master Mikhail last month. The 80,000 J he promised to pay Hibiki for common language lessons. Medical fees for the times Miss Poorly Uzuka patched him up. Technically, the guildmaster never asked him to pay for the last two, but how could he just pretend he didn't know? Rhodes made up his mind. I'll return 20,000 J this month and keep the rest for living expenses. If I keep this up, I can pay everything off in a little over a year. But with the seasons changing soon, I'll need to buy new clothes and supplies. It's better to save a bit more first and pay back larger chunks later. That plan seemed reasonable, but then another thought struck him. If I wait to summon a red brambleback and blue sentinel, and add Grump and the raptor camp, I should have enough summons to handle lower-level missions. But it's best to play it safe. Maybe I should team up with someone first? After all, he was technically allowed to accept jobs now. Master Mikhail had signed off on his ability. But Rhodes wanted to train a little more before jumping into actual guild missions. Just another month or two. Meanwhile, inside the guild's tavern, a half-drunk Mikhail was loudly venting his frustrations over ice-cold beer. "Wakaba, you sure you didn't secretly get divorced?" Wakaba raised a brow. "What? Of course not. What kind of nonsense is that?" Mikhail leaned forward, voice slurring. "It's just weird, man. You haven't complained about your wife in days." Wakaba scratched his head, genuinely puzzled. "Now that you mention it, she has been treating me really well lately. It's almost like when we first got married." Mikhail slammed his mug down. "That's it. That's the dream. What's your secret? Spill it." At this point, Kana, half listening while sipping her wine, couldn't help but interject. "Mikhail, didn't your wife leave you because you only cared about work and ignored your family?" Mikhail's face turned red instantly as he snapped back, "Hey. I was working my ass off to provide for my family." Then, after a brief pause, his tone softened. "But, yeah, I've changed. I take care of Romeo now, and I don't just focus on work." He groaned, slumping over. "Damn it, I just want a happy marriage too." Kana took another slow sip from her cup, side-eyeing the large beer barrel in the corner. "This guy tells me to drink less, but he's drowning in booze every night." Rhodes, sitting nearby, caught Myra's eye and subtly gestured toward Wakaba. "This is your doing," he silently implied. Myra simply smiled, saying nothing. As Mikhail kept pestering Wakaba for answers, Kana threw out a suggestion, "Think back. Did anything unusual happen recently?" Wakaba thought for a moment before snapping his fingers. "Oh. A week ago, my wife got caught in a robbery. Maybe that shook her up." He shrugged. "You know, the one Rhodes and Myra stopped." Rhodes blinked. He remembered Wakaba had given him some personal training afterward as thanks. That was useful. Well, except for the part where Wakaba also taught him which issues of Sorcerer Weekly were the best. Completely useless information. But, maybe I can sell that info to the guild's perverts later. After finishing work for the day, Rhodes headed to the general store for a simple mission. Buy mosquito repellent. Yet somehow, he ended up buying a mosquito net instead. A repellent runs out eventually, but a net lasts forever. That's the smarter investment. This was his secret strategy for saving money. Rhodes was about to head home when he remembered Myra's reminder. Tomorrow was the grand opening of Honey Dessert House. That meant, he needed to look presentable. So, without hesitation, he walked into a clothing store. Then, a few minutes later, straight into a barber shop. Not only did he fail to save money today, but he even ended up spending a little extra. The rhythmic snipping of scissors echoed above his head, strands of hair falling in clumps. Rhodes stared at his reflection in the mirror, contemplating whether he was simply moved by the moment or had completely lost his mind. It wasn't hard to figure out the answer. The real question was, how did Myra see him? From her perspective, if she were to put a label on him, it would probably be something like, newcomer, guildmate, someone who occasionally needed looking after, more obedient than Natsu and the others, hardworking, diligent, and so on. After listing everything, Rhodes came to an unfortunate realization. He was probably no different from the rest of her companions. Just a fellow guild member she had a basic fondness for. At most, they had gotten closer due to working together every day and chatting frequently. Rhodes let out a small sigh. There was still a long road ahead. But hey, at least he had a bit more motivation to train harder. The next morning, after stretching and throwing a few punches at the sandbag to wake up his muscles, Rhodes washed up and got ready to head out. He told himself not to overthink things. Just act normal, like always. But his actions betrayed him. He changed into new clothes and spent a few extra minutes fixing his hair in front of the mirror. After wrapping up his morning shift at the guild tavern, he and Myra left together. The only thing that unsettled Rhodes was Lucky's gaze. The way she looked at him made it painfully clear. Myra, who usually gossiped about everyone else, was now the subject of gossip herself. Myra had chosen a light beige dress today, its hem just grazing her knees. With the sun being particularly relentless since morning, she wore a wide-brimmed sun hat adorned with a soft pink ribbon, adding a youthful and elegant touch to her appearance. Rhodes had never really paid attention before, but now he realized. Myra was only a little shorter than him, just reaching his shoulder. Their height matched pretty well. No, stop that thought. As they walked side by side, a faint fragrance drifted toward him. Before his reincarnation, Rhodes would have assumed it was the scent of shampoo, lotion, or perfume. But after reading through Sorcerer Weekly, he knew there were all sorts of magical beauty products. Spells that could change clothing colors on a whim, charms that emitted floral fragrances, and even enchantments to maintain a fresh, breezy aura. He wasn't sure if Myra used any of those, but her dress looked beautiful, and her scent was really pleasant. Seemingly in high spirits, Myra glanced at him and asked, "Did you get a haircut?" "Yeah." Rhodes nodded casually. "It was getting a bit long since I hadn't cut it in almost a month." Of course, the real reason was her, but admitting that would be way too embarrassing. Instead, he tested the waters and asked nonchalantly, "What do you think? Does it look okay?" Myra tilted her head slightly, observing him for a few seconds before smiling. "It suits you well. I'd say you look even more handsome." Rhodes felt his heart skip a beat. "Really? Thanks." Oh no. Even though he knew she was probably just being polite, the warm feeling in his chest was impossible to suppress. Chapter 41, The Unlucky Guildmaster Welcome. The cheerful voice at the entrance belonged to a cute girl working as the store greeter. Rhodes' first thought? Not as pretty as Myra. "Would you like to sit here?" Another adorable waitress led them to a table. Rhodes' evaluation? Still not as pretty as Myra. As they passed the cashier counter, the woman behind the register flashed them a warm, welcoming smile. Rhodes' silent verdict. "You guessed it. Not as pretty as Myra. Alright, calm down. Breathe. No need to get carried away." The dessert shop was bustling with customers, perhaps due to its grand opening. By the time Rhodes and Myra took their seats, not a single table was left vacant. Most of the patrons were groups of girls chattering excitedly over their sweets, while a handful of tables were occupied by couples. The store played soft, pleasant music, adding to its relaxed, cozy atmosphere. Myra glanced at the menu. Iced coffee, hazelnut cookies, blueberry mousse cake. She picked out two desserts, then hesitated, a conflicted expression on her face.